Give this a... Oh, yeah.
Look, movies like this end when the final girl kills the main bad guy and the credits roll.
Welcome to the Final Girl Podcast. This is the podcast where we discuss and analyze your favorite horror movies. My name is Ryan Turner. With me today, I have a special guest, Mitch Shaw. How you doing, sir?
Hey, doing well, man. How are you?
I'm great. So
I'm excited to be here.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to have you here. You're a listener to the show, and you reached out and everything. We got talking to each other, and I'm so glad to have you on the show now. It's great to have someone on the show who has listened to it before, and this is our first time meeting and everything. So
Yeah.
I'm actually glad to have someone on the show that I haven't known prior to the show.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit before, but I have podcasts that a couple of my friends do, and I've always kind of been interested in podcasts itself and podcasting in general, and just being Michael's cousin, unfortunately.
Unfortunately, well, you got Michael and Daniel,
And
both,
Daniel,
so that's
exactly.
yeah.
And Daniel's my co-host on my other podcast. So, but they. Having the podcast thing going, and for a while now, I've been wanting to get involved in some way or some shape or some form. And I was excited when I found out about your podcast because I love horror movies. You make me feel like I don't really love horror movies all that much because of you are definitely way further into them than I am. And of course, we're in different parts of our lives. So
yeah.
It's not very kosher to watch horror movies around a 2 and a 5-year-old. So
exactly.
That makes it a little bit tougher. But yeah, I grew up loving what got me into it was Scream, and then we got to talking about Scream being both of our favorite movies, and I just have always, since I saw Scream, have just been hooked.
Oh,
and I try to watch as many of them as I can. But yeah, this show has actually gotten me to watch even more than I thought I would. The Christie movie, I was like, what is this? It's on YouTube. I'm going to watch this on YouTube.
Exactly.
And it was good. It was a really good movie.
I feel like that movie is one of those movies that it's very much underrated. Like it flies under your radar, you don't see it, and then you watch it and you're like, wow, okay, that actually was surprisingly good.
Yeah, I love movies like that too. Not even just horror movies, but movies that slide under the radar that aren't
absolutely
super popular, but really hit home. Those are always the best ones in my book. So.
Absolutely, yeah. And that's kind of how I feel. I know I bring this up all the time, but like Midsommar, I feel like it flew under the radar for a minute and then it became really popular. And so, I don't know. I'm glad I got to it before it became super popular, but it is what it is. I'm not going to be like a hipster and be like, I'm not going to watch it now because people love it.
Yeah.
That's not me, because obviously you said our favorite movie is Scream. That movie's huge.
Yeah, it was massive.
And I'm glad you bring that up, because the movie we're talking about today, I was watching it today actually before this happened, and I'm just like, there's so many references to Scream in this movie.
And when you and I and Michael were arranging this whole thing, I even was like, Michael, it's not that much like Scream. You might actually like it. And then I go to start, I watched it again, and I started seeing references and things that stuck out. And then I started reading all the facts that I was reading from IMDb. And one of them actually blatantly says that and lists out some of the things that they stole from Scream.
Oh, yeah.
So then I'm like, oh, great. Now Michael's never going to watch it.
He's never going to watch it.
He's never going to listen to this episode. Oh, well, he probably wouldn't have anyway, but yeah.
He'll he has to listen to it while he edits it. So,
That's true.
That is
That's
true.
true.
Yep. But yeah, so the movie we're doing today, guys, we keep talking about it, so might as well let you all know. We are doing Urban Legend from 1998. So, yeah, there are a lot of Scream references here because it's 2 years after Scream came out. And I believe it's the year the sequel came out to Scream.
It was actually 97 was Scream 2.
Oh, 97,
yeah,
okay.
It came out the next year because there's actually a couple things in here where some of the actors that were in Scream 2 were also in this movie.
I noticed that, yeah, because like one of the main girls was in Scream 2 from this movie, yeah. So... Let me go ahead and just go through my general facts about the film and everything before we hop in here. So this movie, guys, like I said, Urban Legend, 1998. And boy, is this movie 98. Like, this movie is hard.
So
90s.
98.
Yeah. So this film was directed by Jamie Blanks. It was written by Sylvia Horta, who actually has a cameo in the film, which we'll talk about at some point. Maybe I might bring that back up. I don't know. If I don't, there you go. He has a cameo in the film. And it stars Jared Leto, which was interesting to me.
His role was, interesting. It's good.
Here's the thing about Jared Leto. I don't hate Jared Leto. I understand why people don't like Jared Leto, but this was way before Joker, obviously. This was way before, I don't know if it was way before 30 Seconds to Mars or not. I don't know when he started that band.
It was probably right at the precipice of 30 Seconds to Mars because their first album wasn't really even that popular, and it was early 2000s. So it wasn't, I don't think it was too far before, but it's not like Jared Leto 30 Seconds to Mars is now.
Right.
Even like early 30 Seconds to Mars Jared Leto is way different than he is now.
Absolutely.
Like doing the whole Jesus thing that he's doing and the weird cult things, and that's just an odd bird now.
Odd bird. Well, he always has been, for sure. But I don't hate him in this movie. I think he fits the role of it. I definitely think he fits better than someone would have fit like Freddie Prinze Jr. at this time or someone else like that. They're just like, I think they tried to capture that essence because I Know What You Did Last Summer was also popular around this time. Yeah. And so they're just like, we need someone who's going to be like that, but we don't want to just get Freddie Prinze Jr. in here.
Well, and I feel like he caught the, or he filled the role of the reporter that he played in a way that made him not so, how do I put it? He was suspicious enough to be like a red possible red herring, but he was also like it almost seemed like he was genuine in what he was trying to do and the good guy aspect of it too. So it was really, I thought it was a really well played part for him.
Absolutely. And I will say too, I know we're going to talk about this later on, but like there are so many red herrings throughout this film.
Yes.
And I think the movie does it well with certain characters. Other characters is very blatantly just like, seriously, forced. Like you were forcing this on me. Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, like I was saying, we got Jared Leto in here. We have Alicia Witt, who her acting was not my favorite. No, she didn't do the best in here.
The acting in general in this movie isn't the greatest. To be honest,
not. Yeah,
but for what you wouldn't really consider a B film, it had very B acting.
It really did. It had the production of like of Scream, but also the acting of like a B horror film. Yeah, for sure. Rebecca Gayheart, Joshua Jackson, Loretta Devine, Tara Reid, Michael Rosenbaum, and Robert Englund are all also starring in this film. So with all that being said, guys, spoiler effect, spoiler warning in effect as of right now. We're going to talk about the whole movie in its entirety, explain the intricate details of what all's in this film, even though there's not many intricate details to this film. It's mostly just a straight up slasher film from the 90s. But there are some things we can delve into and talk about. So with that being said, go ahead and watch the movie if you've not done so already. It's a pretty easy watch. It's like, hour and a half?
Yeah, it's 90 minutes. Yeah. Maybe a little bit less.
Only place I found it was on Amazon. I don't know where you watched it.
You can get it, you can watch it on, it's like one of the free, like Pluto TV.
Pluto, okay.
Yeah, you can watch it on Pluto TV with ads. It runs about 2 hours with the ads. So,
okay.
Not a hard watch though.
I rented it for $3 on Amazon.
Yeah, I rented it for $3 on Amazon, so I didn't have to worry about the ads.
Exactly.
But yeah, and I actually own it, but it's in storage, so I could have just watched it that way, but I didn't feel like going to my storage unit.
Go dig it out of like a VHS player somewhere, a VCR.
Yeah.
I just felt really old right there saying a VHS player. I know what a VCR is. I just said it wrong.
Be kind and rewind.
Be kind, rewind, yes. So go check out the movie if you've not seen it already. But with that in mind, let's go ahead and just dive into the film. Let's go talk about this.
Let's do it.
All right.
So get off your phone. Jeez.
Well, I got all my notes in my phone. I know. I'm the worst.
He's the worst.
All right, so we open on a rainy night, obviously, of course. What would be a 90s slasher without a good old rainy night sequence?
It's always got to be raining.
And so we open on a rainy night. We meet this girl, Michelle Mancini, and she is driving home, I guess, from college. It doesn't really ever say where she's going.
Don't know if she's going to or from college or what.
Yeah, she's heading somewhere. And real quick before we move any further, I think it's an interesting fact I saw on Amazon that Mancini is a reference to the writer of the Child's Play series.
Yep.
Yeah, Don Mancini. And then we also have Brad Dourif, who plays the voice of Chucky.
The voice of Chucky, yep.
Yeah, in this here coming up too. So
and he also plays, I think, in the Clockwork Orange. As he also in this film, he has a stutter, and in a Clockwork Orange, he also played a person with a speech impediment.
Oh, okay.
So it was something that I guess maybe it's like a method acting thing that he does.
Just more method, yeah.
So
that's interesting to think about because, I mean, obviously it is something that happens a lot in films. You have characters who have disabilities that they don't have in real life. So I mean, it must be some kind of method acting though to have someone portray the same disability, yeah, right. Exactly, over and over again, so they have the same thing.
So one thing on this scene. This was actually the scene that the director. This was the director's debut film as well, and this was a scene that he actually shot to pitch to the producing company. To get them to buy onto it. So this opening scene was actually shot for the purpose of getting the money for the film. So,
okay, that's cool. Well, it makes sense because I honestly do think the opening scene is probably one of the better scenes of the whole movie.
Yeah.
I think they did this really well. I love the idea of the fact that like the gas station attendant comes out and sees the person in the back seat, but then he can't get across the fact that someone's back there, and she drives off in a panic. So I don't know. I like the whole setup for this.
Yeah,
it reminds me a lot of Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I don't know if you've seen that movie. I
have. It's been a while, but I don't remember it too well. But yeah.
So it's just the whole like kind of redneck guy who's trying to help the people, but ends up being terrifying to the college girl, and so she drives off. And
yeah, and this scene, while it's not the greatest acting in the world, it was one of those scenes that when I remember watching this film when I was in college, I think, and it really just sets the bar.
Oh, absolutely.
It was, and it may have been the best scene. It was one of the better scenes probably of the film, but it set a tone for this is pretty. It's going to be pretty cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But it also, and this is one thing that I liked about the film, but I also is kind of refreshing compared to others is you'll notice when you watch this film that a lot of the killings and the death scenes are very muted and not super gory,
right?
And it was intentional. The director did intentionally choose to do that. So I kind of like that because you kind of sometimes you go overboard with the gore, and then other times it's
it's very easy to go overboard with gore, in these kind of movies. And you're right. I like the fact he didn't go super gory with it. I wish there was a little bit more on-screen deaths.
Yeah.
There's a lot of off-screen, but it's hard to pick and choose what you want, because you can either go super gory and be like Saw, or not enough and be just bland. But they had an R rating here, so it's kind of like you had it. Why not push the envelope a little bit more?
Yeah, I get that too. Yep, for sure.
So yeah, we have Michelle. She's driving through the night and the rain. She needs to stop for gas, and so she ends up at a gas station. And we have one of the many jump scares in this movie that make no sense to me. Like, why try to scare the shit out of your guests at your gas station? But I mean, hey, he does it. So we have this gas station employee shows up, and after she honks her horn a million times to try to get someone's attention, which I never saw a sign that said self-serve or not self-serve.
I think that there was a sign that was
or full service.
Full service.
Yeah.
But what I laughed about was she literally pulls up, sits there for a second, and mind you, it's a torrential downpour.
Oh yeah.
And she's literally just pulled up and already has started to honk her horn. Bitch, the guy's probably got to get his jacket on or something. Give him a second to get out the door. But she's immediately honking on the horn. Also, great music in this movie.
Oh, absolutely.
90s music. So
great 90s music.
Turn Around, Bright Eyes was playing on the radio whenever she pulls into the gas station, and also at her demise.
Yeah, and not to mention, too, there's one song I noticed later on. The Zoot Suit Riot was playing at one of the party scenes, and I was just like, Okay, interesting choice, but I'm not mad about it. It's like
about
the 90s had that weird thing for ska and kind of like just the, you know, that kind of general music, and it was
like the Macarena. And
exactly.
all those
It was
that.
a weird era of music because you
was.
had the grunge and the, you know, rock, and then the ska music. And it's just like, okay. I mean, I'm not mad about it, but all right.
Yeah.
So the gas station attendant shows up. He starts pumping her gas, and at this point, he notices something in the back seat.
Yeah.
And he goes back inside and comes out later and pretends that there's a problem with her card. And he's trying to stutter to get through. You know, you need to come inside. There's an error with your card. And eventually she comes inside, and he says they're on the phone for you. And before he can explain to her what's going on, she picks up the phone and notices the line's dead. So immediately she's like panicking.
Yep.
She's
Suspicious.
like, something's going on.
And he, as he's coming back in the door, he locks the door.
It. Yeah.
And you hear that loud clink whenever it shows her realizing that nobody's on the other line, and he's locked the door. So she's like, oh shit,
something bad gonna happen. Yeah. And she also has pepper spray on her too. Yep. So he turns around and he's trying to explain what's going on, but I have a friend who has a stutter, and I understand the fact that like when they're in high tense situations, it makes it even worse to speak. Yeah. And so this scene actually plays out perfectly. Like this is 100% what would be going on with someone with this disability or speech impediment. And it makes it all that more real that he can't get out. Hey, you're in trouble. Yeah, you need to like not listen to me. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm trying to help you.
Right.
But he can't get that out, and so she panics and she freaks out and she busts the window down. And he goes to grab her. She turns around and pepper sprays him, and then finally flees through the window. She gets in the car, drives off, and he's finally able to scream out, "Someone's in your back seat."
Yep. And one little thing that it showed when it first comes and cuts into the scene, you hear a radio conversation. It's Tara Reid. She's a radio host, and she talks about
her name.
Sasha, yeah. And she talks about like sex a lot, and she's like, you know, reads every issue of Cosmo is what her boyfriend says in the movie at one point. And but she's talking, and she Michelle gets disgusted or doesn't like whatever's being on, so she reaches in her back seat to pick out a cassette tape. So it was cassettes back then.
She got that 8-track in the car.
Yeah, she got an 8-track here. And so she reaches in the back seat, and when it shows her reaching in the back seat, we catch a glimpse of the coat that the killer is wearing in the whole movie. And it's like a winter coat, and it's got fur around the face, and then it's a muted face, so you can't see the actual face. But what I found interesting was everybody has the same exact coat in this movie.
It's kind of just, again, another reference to, I Know What You Did Last Summer, to where everyone has the same slicker. Yeah, that they wear that the killer wears. So, well, I think, too, another reason for that being is one thing I saw was that the movie was supposed to take place during winter originally.
And it wasn't cold enough.
Right, it wasn't cold enough to film it during winter. They just kept the killer's jacket. Then also, too, the movie takes place in Maine, I believe. Or New Hampshire, somewhere up in Northeast. Yeah, so it's going to be cold regardless. So everyone's going to have one of those really heavy winter coats.
So was the coat hers, or was it the killer laying there?
We don't really found know. One and got it,
Right, and he happened to see her. So that, because I remember when I first saw it, I remember thinking, well, that coat's laying there, and he looked in. Maybe it's just her coat laying there, you know. And that was what I was trying to piece together. Was, did he know that it was a person and saw the rest of the body laying there, you know, in the back seat, or did they purposely show us that just because everybody in the film's wearing the coat? You know, is
to kind of make it
just everybody could be a red herring type thing. So
that's interesting. I never thought about that. I never also pieced that together. So,
but yeah, literally everybody everybody that wears a coat in this film has it up over their head, and you can't see their face.
And like 3 different people have this coat during the movie, so you're just like, are you serious?
Yeah, it's kind of ridiculous. But yes, and then she drives away.
Yeah,
and
here comes her demise because the person in the backseat sits up with an axe and swings it through and decapitates her. And it goes through the windshield, like through the window, and shatters the window and everything. Another note that I saw on Amazon, I'm sure you saw it too if you were reading the trivia on the thing. They wanted it to be a Land Rover, or the car she was driving.
I was actually going to bring that up. Yeah.
They wanted it to be a Land Rover while she was driving, but it wasn't big enough to swing an accent, so they had to change it to a Ford Escape.
Yep, Expedition.
Expedition,
the biggest Ford vehicle SUV that they could find, the Expedition, so that they could actually swing the axe in there. And then also on the note of them muting, I said that really emphasis on the T. A note on them and how they muted a lot of the death scenes. Her head was actually supposed to come out of the window and fall onto the ground, her decapitated head, but they took that out of the film to kind of take down some of the gore. I feel like that wouldn't have been that big of a deal.
That wouldn't have been that bad, no.
In the 90s, maybe, but...
That's what I was going to say. I feel like a lot of the 90s movies, they muted a lot of the violence just to make it, even though they had an R rating, like I Know What You Did Last Summer, and movies like that, they're just like, we can go more graphic, but we're not going to because I don't know if it's like because this was before Columbine, so it had nothing to do with that, and before, all the tragedy of 9/11 and stuff like that, but like, because I know a lot of movies had issues with 9/11 happening and stuff, but like, I don't know why they muted it so much. I guess it was just a lot of the whole... maybe the Marilyn Manson and advocates and stuff, and like people against Marilyn Manson, they're just like, maybe we can't push the envelope so hard.
But then they go ahead and throw Marilyn Manson in this movie as well. So.
Well, it was Rob Zombie, I think they were playing.
Well, he was his poster. Marilyn Manson's poster was on Tosh's wall.
I know one song that in Tosh's wall was Rob Zombie they were playing. Like when she first walks in, because I love Rob Zombie. I really do. I love his music. I love his movies, and I'm going to cover House of a Thousand Corpses one day. Mark my words.
Ooh, that's a good one.
That's a great movie.
I like, not to get off topic, but I liked the, what was the second one?
Devil's Rejects.
Devil's Rejects better.
Have you watched Free From Hell?
Not yet.
It's not worth your time.
I didn't. I originally, when I first saw the preview, I was like, "Ooh, I want to see that," but I never again got into having a family and kids and stuff. So I just never got around to watching it. And I know like those movies are really over the top with the violence,
absolutely,
really over the top with the language. So I'm like, it's going to be hard to ever watch this one. But
completely off topic. I know we're tangenting here. I watched it because it was Sid Haig's last movie, and I love Sid Haig. Rest in peace. And he was in the first 5 minutes, and then they killed him off in the movie.
Oh, no kidding.
So he's not even in it. Yeah,
he's a great role too, and all those movies that he played in.
Absolutely,
always loved him.
Now they did bring Richard Brake in. I really love Richard Brake, especially in these grungy Rob Zombie movies and everything. But I don't know. It felt like it retconned the perfect ending to Devil's Rejects, because Devil's Rejects ended in a great way, I feel like, and there was no need for a third one. It was just a moneymaker.
Yeah, I think it did.
So, I don't know. But that's enough about that. We'll talk about that movie later on.
The movie we're not even talking about tonight.
Exactly. Yes. So, after Michelle is murdered, we then cut to Pendleton College?
Pendleton University.
Pendleton University, yeah. And we meet our main characters that we have now, and that is Sasha Parker. Paul is Jared Leto's character, I believe. Natalie and what's the other girl's name? Rebecca Gayheart. She plays her.
Brenda.
Brenda. Okay.
Brenda. Yep.
Yeah. So these are our and Damon as well. Damon's also mentioned. I don't know if we meet him at this moment, but mentioned
he's
him.
Later. Yeah, that's Joshua Jackson's character. Yeah.
So we have this group of college kids, and it is exactly how you think the college in the 90s would be. They're sitting in a local lounge area,
like a coffee shop or
something. And it's honestly, truly, I'm gonna sound like, I don't know, I'm gonna sound weird here. I wish I'd gone to college in the 90s. Obviously I was born in the 90s, so I couldn't have. But I just love how simple and connected they all seem, because you think about times, and I have this written in my notes, so it's like, I don't think this movie could be made today. It done well, at least today, because nowadays it's just like, oh, the urban legend, let me just look this up here. In this movie, they're sitting around talking about these legends, and I think that's honestly why ghost stories aren't as effective nowadays, because we're just so disconnected from everything. Back then, we can't just Google, oh, did that shit really happen?
Yeah.
Like the Stanley Hall Massacre, now we can just be like, that didn't really happen. But back then, it really was all word of ear. And so it makes it way more scary in the moment and connected in that way.
Yeah, I agree too. Like when I started college, I'm a little older than you, I think. But I started college in 2003, and it was right at the cusp of when people started getting cell phones.
Exactly.
But it wasn't like they were smartphones, so it was literally just to, make a phone call. It's not like you're texting 24/7 or anything like that. So, it was nice. I went to WVU and, things were a lot different. We were way more interpersonal versus, now it's just everybody's noses in their phone 24/7. And I agree. I think it would have been harder. It would be harder to make that film today, unless you just based it in the 90s.
Set it in the 90s, exactly.
And nobody had cell phones anyway. So.
Which I think, if I'm right on looking at this, I believe it said they're having a reboot. Yeah, in February 2020, a reboot of the film was announced to be in development.
Ooh.
But no more word of that.
That's other than a year ago. That was
right before COVID
right
hit.
Before COVID, so they probably had to exit.
So,
pun intended.
I see what you did there. So regardless, we have our group of college kids, and they're sitting in this like coffee shop lounge area. And Parker is retelling the story of the Stanley Hall Massacre because it's the 25th anniversary of it. And it's an urban legend of this college that apparently what happened was a professor snapped and went around the dorm room just knocking on every door. Anyone who answered, he slit their throat and killed. And so Brenda and Sasha don't really believe him. They're like, oh, that's just an urban legend. Every college in the Northeast has that story that happens and all this stuff like that. But he swears it's true. And Paul comes by and he says, where's your proof? Because Paul is the reporter. He's like, I need proof before I believe all this bullshit that you're spewing.
Right.
Yeah. And Paul and Parker have a weird relationship. They seem like they're like it's at first it seemed like they didn't know each other, but then they're like, oh, now we're best friends, but now we're gonna be assholes to each other.
Right. It's an odd dynamic because I feel like they try to play it up like they're supposed to be best friends, but they definitely have that like love-hate thing going on.
Absolutely,
because they really rag on each other,
and especially later in the movie.
Yeah,
especially later in the movie during the party scene, there's just like so much to where. If they were best friends, you're doing a really bad job of showing that they're best friends.
Yeah. So it's kind of hard to tell. They set it up almost like when Paul walks in, he's known. It's a small university. They mentioned there's about 3,200 students on campus, or 3,500 students on campus. So it's a small university. So I feel like most people probably know at least who he is, especially if he's like the reporter. So they kind of set it up like there's been, prior conversation or, some kind of a relationship between the main group and Paul, aka Jared Leto. But we don't really know the true depth of it. But we know, Brenda has a huge crush on her.
As
we
does.
see as he's leaving, and she goes, "Bye, Paul."
and you touched on it a little bit. That's one thing I want to mention here. I feel like this movie lacks character depth. We know the characters, or we at least meet them, but we never get to delve deep into really any of them except for Natalie, I feel like.
Natalie and a little bit of Brenda because
of the events that happened.
And, we'll get there. But and more depth really in Michelle, who dies in the first 4 minutes of the movie than most of the other characters in the movie.
Characters are just literally there to be dead meat.
And maybe Professor Wexler.
You get a little bit of his backstory.
A little bit of his backstory. But outside of that, because he doesn't play a big role, the rest of them, you don't really know much about them. They're just kind of like you have your jocular frat boy Damon and
Parker's also that way.
Pretty much a jocular frat boy too, and you have your sex addict and Sasha and
the goth roommate,
or
Tosh,
and so it's kind of you have a lot of tropey characters, but not a lot of depth to any of them.
Absolutely, they're very shallow characters, and honestly, that's kind of the point I think of 90s slashers is like. You don't really want a lot of depth to your characters because it's just they're there on the screen to look pretty, then they die.
And then they die,
yeah.
And the ones you get depth from typically are the ones who
they survive.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
So we have the story being told and everything, and I believe at this point there's a lot that happens here in the beginning. I'm trying to remember everything that happens. Brenda mentions how hot Paul is, and as he walks off and everything, and then Natalie goes back to her dorm room, I think, and this is where we meet Tosh.
No, I think this is the scene where they go to summon Bloody Mary.
That's right, the Bloody Mary scene. Okay, yeah. So they talk about the Stanley Hall and everything, and they're talking about how urban legends are just a bunch of bullshit. They don't actually believe them. And to prove that point, Brenda decides to play Bloody Mary in front of the Stanley Hall. Yeah, which I have in my notes here. Bloody Mary is 3 times in front of a mirror. Yeah, they said it 5 times. That's Candyman. You got your urban legends backwards.
They got them all mixed up.
They got them all backwards there. But yeah, again, nothing happens. They just say Bloody Mary in front of the boarded up hall, and then Damon shows up.
Yeah, this is where we meet Damon because he plays a little prank on them. You hear his voice, which you find out later afterwards it's Joshua Jackson, and then you can tell it's him when he's screaming. And then he pops up behind with another cheap jump scare and a flashlight in his face, and
classic.
Why are you guys here? This is so silly. You guys are trying to summon the dead. That's not going to work.
Exactly. He just gives them a bunch of crap for trying to play Bloody Mary and everything.
Yep.
And so we get this kind of just idea that Damon is your typical frat boy douchebag kind of guy, and he's just there for sex and booze and having fun. He's not actually there to learn anything.
Right.
Which is very much against what Natalie's there for. She's very much like your standard, typical, like type A kind of person. She's here to learn and not to goof around and everything. Right. And so all these urban legend jokes people are playing are just, foolish. She doesn't have time for that.
She's got her blinders on for the education thing. And
exactly. And that's when she goes back to her dorm. We meet the creepy janitor at this point. Who literally is just known as the creepy janitor. I don't think he has a name in the movie.
I didn't see one, just creepy janitor.
Yeah. And she goes into her dorm room and is greeted by her roommate having sex. And she screams, "Turn the lights off." And it's, foreshadowing heavily for what's to come.
Yeah.
But yeah, she turns the lights off and then she goes to sleep with her roommate in there just having sex with this random dude. Yeah. I didn't live in dorms, so I can't vouch for this, but I don't know if that's a natural thing that I would feel like, the sock on the door or something like that. Be like, hey, come back later. Don't just come in, go to sleep while I'm in here.
Yeah. Living in the dorms, I lived in Summit Hall on, notorious Grant Street and Morgantown. And I don't know if it was just weird for our class or what, but that shit never happened.
Exactly.
Not like that anyway. I mean, my roommate, anything, if there was any of that kind of stuff going on, it was just, known. You just don't come in and it's not going to last all night, or it's not going to, it's not going to be something that I can't come into my bedroom and go to sleep later on. But she just comes right in and lays down and puts some headphones on, and I feel like you kind of get a glimpse of her, of Natalie and her angst, not angst, but her sorrow, because it kind of zooms into her face as she's laying there trying to tune it out, and she almost looks like she's in tears.
Right. There's definitely something bothering her.
But something is bothering her. Something is, she just doesn't feel right.
Right.
And not about the fact that she walked in her gothy roommate having sex loudly and with screamo rock music going on, but more so just, there's something weighing heavy on her mind.
Exactly, yeah.
And you get that first glimpse here of that. And I wanted to also talk about, they are trying to build a character development type aspect of Natalie and Brenda and their relationship here at the beginning with those first couple scenes, and then the Bloody Mary thing. And, they're trying to show us here that there is somewhat of a sustained friendship, at least. Yeah. We don't know how long, but that it's at least been since they've been in college that they've known each other, and they've kind of connected pretty well since they've been in college.
We can assume, because the movie takes place in April. We learned that just from the flyer that I saw in the movie. But we can assume they're like sophomores probably, because they say that Michelle was a sophomore. And so coming to find out later that Natalie knew Michelle, we can assume they're at least sophomores. So that almost makes them juniors. So for about 2 years now, they've known each other. Yeah. If we're going to assume that that's the case. So
and that'll come into play a little bit more as we get through the story of why I'm laying this groundwork. But the fact that they are pretty close here plays a big part in the rest of the
Exactly.
film. So
yeah. So Natalie ends up going to sleep, and then the next day we wake up and we are in class, and we're in Professor Wexler's class. He teaches American folklore, and oddly enough, he's talking about urban legends. So
what are the chances?
What are the chances of that? Yep, he's talking about urban legends. He tells the story of the man in the attic, or the man like the call from inside the house with the babysitter, which. A version of this urban legend is probably one of the most terrifying urban legends to me personally. It's the one where the babysitter gets a call, like, have you checked on the kids and everything? And she goes up there and finds, they're all fine. But then she leaves and sees the creepy clown statue in the parents' room. And she calls back. She's like, what's with the creepy clown statue? And they're like, we don't have a clown statue. And it's like, that's the... I hate it. I hate it so much.
I've never heard that one before. That's pretty creepy, though.
Yeah, I hate that one. But regardless, they're telling the story about the man and the, calling from inside the house. And Brenda's like, oh, that happened in my hometown. And Wexler's just like, of course it did. Yep. Yeah, that happened in
everybody's
hometown
had that, yeah.
Yeah, so he's trying to make a point that, urban legends are spread around. We don't know where they originated from. It just ends up being everyone's hometown. Yeah. That's where it happened. Yep. So, 25 years ago, 50 years ago, all this stuff like that. Because it's so well known and so commonplace, it just ends up being, someone from your hometown.
Right. And it's always like some time span so long ago that nobody can really go back and verify
can vouch for it,
very well. So, yeah, it's kind of like, unless somebody survived it, you don't really know for sure. But one thing that we saw here in this scene that was interesting is there's a book laying on Professor Wexler's desk that we catch a glimpse of, and it's called The Vanishing Hitchhiker. And it is one of the seminal texts based on urban legends. So I thought that was one pretty cool point that IMDb showed. One of those little Easter eggs that you see if you pay attention well enough.
Exactly.
That you'll pick up on, and then maybe if you guys are interested in reading more about urban legends, The Vanishing Hitchhiker might be something you'd want to look up. So yeah.
I definitely need to go back through and watch this again, because this was the first time I've seen this movie in probably 10 years, I'd say. Like, watching today was the first time I've seen it in forever. And definitely you do catch things on repeated watches, like and stuff like that. So, and I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff, like when they go into Wexler's office later on, I guarantee you there's a bunch of stuff in
I've
those
got a really good Easter egg for you.
There you go. See, I know you'd have something there.
That's one of them.
All right. So we have this urban legends class going on, and Wexler calls Brenda up to the front and says, "Here, well, why don't you come, volunteer to be my, subject on this experiment?" And he gives her a pack of Pop Rocks.
Yeah.
And
we've all heard this one.
Yeah, we all know this urban legend. Gives her a pack of Pop Rocks, and she eats them, and then he says, "Are you thirsty?" and hands her a Pepsi, and she refuses to drink it. And I love the Pepsi ad placement in this movie.
Yeah. Because that was actually the first time that the blue Pepsi can had been... basically, it hadn't been out in public yet.
Oh, really?
That was when, in that movie, was the first time that the blue Pepsi can was basically released to the public.
Okay.
So that was another fun fact.
That's interesting, yeah.
Also, Rebecca Gayheart got sick after eating so many Pop Rocks from
all the takes and everything.
Yep, from all the takes. But yeah,
it's interesting they made her actually eat Pop Rocks just repeatedly like that, and not just fake it or something.
I know, because you could really hear it actually while she's eating them. You can hear her crunching on them. Mm-hmm. Like, it's legit. Like, she's eating these Pop Rocks, and he offers her the Pepsi, which plays out as the
Pop Rocks and soda.
Yeah, the Pop Rocks and soda urban legend, and that it supposedly took the life of
Damon, right? Yeah, he's the one who comes up.
No, but who did it supposedly take the life of?
Oh crap! What's the kid's name? I know who you're talking about. I'm trying to think of what they called him.
Mikey likes.
Yes,
Mikey from the Life cereal commercials.
Yes. So Brenda brings up the fact that is, where she knows the legend from. It killed that kid who, Little Mikey or something was his name?
Little Mikey.
Little Mikey. I don't remember those commercials or anything. I've never seen them, but I definitely have heard the story of the Pop Rocks and soda. Yeah. So she refuses to drink the soda, and then Damon here is like, "I got you. I'll do it. Fuck it. I don't care."
Right. And Professor Wexler even points out too that that he talks about, what if I told you that this is
this
Michael
is Mikey
now,
yeah.
and he's living fine and well and is working as an ad executive or something.
Yeah.
And it shows a picture of him as an adult, and it certainly does look like it. It's believable, and I'm sure he is. I know he did survive it, or didn't actually die from that, but just an interesting little thing. Like even though he proved
that it's not true.
It's not true.
She still has it so ingrained in her
right,
head, yeah.
that she refuses, and Damon says, "I'll do it."
Yeah, he's like, "Here, I'll do it." So he comes to the front of class, downs a pack of Pop Rocks, like the entire thing, grabs the Pepsi, opens it up, chugs it, and as soon as he drinks it, it's funny. I thought it was funny because Wex was just like, "See, he's fine." Like he hadn't even swallowed it.
Yeah,
yet.
he hadn't even had a chance to get down to his stomach.
Exactly. He's like, "See, he's fine." And then Damon starts acting weird. He grabs a hold of Wexler's shoulder and starts convulsing a little bit. And like foam from the Pepsi comes out of his mouth, and he falls down the front of the class. And Brenda's terrified. She's screaming. Everyone's like up and watching him. And he's like convulsing and like seizuring on the floor. And then he just opens his eyes and starts laughing. And we realize here that Damon 100%, class clown kind of trick right now. This reminded me of something that Stu from Scream would have done.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
This 100% was a Stu move.
That was a Stu move for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if we brought it up yet. I think I know you mentioned in passing, but Professor Wexler is played by Robert Englund.
Robert Englund,
who,
yeah.
Famously played Freddy Krueger. So,
Just
a little, yeah.
Freddy Krueger.
Yeah, and those are legit.
These are legit, yeah, legit metal here. So now they wouldn't cut you or anything.
They wouldn't cut anything, but yeah, that's pretty neat.
I've got a friend who has a legit sharpened and like handmade Freddy glove, and it's really cool. So I would love to get one, but I haven't gotten one yet. So, but yeah, Robert Englund played Freddy Krueger, and he's in this movie, and I'm trying to remember like what else he's been in, because I don't think he's been in a whole lot of stuff. I mean, I'm sure he's been in things, but nothing.
He's made like cameos and things, but it's mostly just tied to his Freddy Krueger
right,
role,
his success came from Freddy Krueger, or Nightmare on Elm Street, I guess I should say, not Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
But yeah, of playing Freddy Krueger.
Clearly, Freddy versus Jason, the most popular one of the series.
That movie is so bad. Oh, God, that movie.
It's bad, but it's fun.
It's one of my guilty pleasure movies, honestly. Yeah. Like, that movie and 13 Ghosts. 13 Ghosts.
Oh, I love 13 Ghosts.
13 Ghosts is one of my guilty pleasure movies, because that movie's trash.
It's trash,
but it's great.
So fun. It is. It's fun.
It's a fun movie. Yeah, absolutely.
And 13 Ghosts, we keep getting off on these little tangents.
It's okay.
13 Ghosts reminds me a lot of the ending of Cabin in the Woods with all the all the monsters and stuff, and 13 Ghosts, and you have all these 13 Ghosts. There's a lot of, I felt like a lot of similarities there in those movies. Maybe some inspirations.
Absolutely, yeah. Because the way the elevators in Cabin in the Woods that kind of shift around everything, very much like the house changing in 13 Ghosts. That movie's very disorienting.
It is.
But I love it. It's a great movie.
I do.
So after the class, this is where they go out to the square and they have the newspapers. They find out about Michelle, about her death. Yeah. So they go outside and they find the dean and the cops, like the university police, is taking all the newspapers down, but because they say like lunatic on the loose or something, and they talk about Michelle's death. And Brenda grabs one before they can be taken all away. And she kind of explains, oh my God, this girl is dead. She's a sophomore. She's headed home. And so she gets decapitated in her car. And Paul comes in and is pissed off that they're taking away all of his papers. He's like, this is my article. This is my, because he's all about becoming famous as a reporter. Right. That's his like end game.
The student Pulitzer, he mentions a few times and wanting to win that. So
yeah, and so he's all mad about that. But the dean's, this is my school. We're not going to report what I don't want to report, and takes papers away. And this sets Natalie off. Like, not the fact that they're taking the papers away, but like the hearing about the death of Michelle, something doesn't sit right with her. Mm-hmm. And everyone kind of realizes it, but no one knows why.
And they don't even tell us yet either.
Exactly. We don't know yet. It's not until later that night when she goes home, she pulls out, before she gets the yearbook, she goes home and toshes on the computer. Yep. And I love this little tidbit of like 90s here. Yeah. She goes to use the phone and the dial-up, it's connected to the internet. And she's like, can I use the phone, please? And Tosh is just like, it's half of my internet too.
It's my phone line too.
It's my phone line too, yeah. And just turns off her computer all angrily. And we get the voicemail from her mom saying, I heard about Michelle. And so there we kind of realize, oh, something's here. And that's when she pulls out the yearbook, opens it up, and we find that they were both cheer captains at the same high school.
Together, yep.
So they knew each other. So that's kind of like why Natalie is all upset, and disappointed at the fact that her friend has now died. But at the same time, too, you mentioned there's something inside Natalie before this happened. So it's kind of a weird mix of sadness, but also like there's something else there.
Yeah, I felt that too. Should mention too, Tosh is played by Danielle Harris, who also played in the remake of the Halloween movies that
Rob Zombie
did, along with Brad Dourif, who played the creepy the creepy janitor, but the gas station attendant.
Yeah,
he was also in the Halloween remake.
Oh, I didn't realize he was in those. Yeah,
they were both in that together. But Danielle Harris has been around the horror movie genre for a long time.
I would say she has cemented herself as Scream Queen icon at this point.
Yeah, I think, sure.
Yeah,
I mean,
she's
in a subtle one though.
A subtle one, exactly. She's never the final girl or the star, but she's in a lot of horror movies. I correct me if I'm wrong. I probably am. I think she got her start in Halloween 4, right?
Yeah, it was Halloween. Yeah, Halloween 4.
Halloween 4, yeah, where she played Michael's niece.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then that kind of cemented her in the Halloween legacy, and so that made her a horror movie icon, basically, along with Jamie Lee Curtis and everyone.
Before we go too far, speaking of Scream Queens, the list of actors, I don't know if you came by this, but the list of actresses that turned down roles in this movie was crazy. And we had Jennifer Love Hewitt, obviously, I Know What You Did Last Summer, Sarah Michelle Gellar, who was in Scream 2, Melissa Joan Hart, who, bless her heart, wasn't in any scary movies, but played, the witch.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Yeah. Jodie Lynn O'Keefe, which I didn't recognize her, and Reese Witherspoon all turned down roles for this movie for various reasons. A couple of them were filming other movies at the same time.
Sarah Michelle Gellar was filming Buffy, right? I believe at the time.
It was Buffy. It was that held her back. Yeah,
it's funny that Sarah Michelle Gellar and Jennifer Love Hewitt both turned down roles for this movie because they were both in I Know What You Did Last Summer.
Yep.
Yeah, and then this movie's so heavily focused around Scream. It's like, it's all right up her alley.
Yeah, but those were some interesting names that I thought, when I was reading through, all had ties to other, most had ties to other
horror movies,
horror movies or the scary genres of
the supernatural
stuff,
like Sabrina and everything. Yeah. Now I will say, obviously, Sabrina the Teenage Witch in the '90s is not like Sabrina the Teenage Witch was now that came out on Netflix.
Yeah,
I don't know if you watched that or not. It's different. It's very much like teen drama, but it's heavy in the occult.
Oh, okay.
Like Sabrina the Teenage Witch was obviously, we're witches, but we're not going to talk a lot about demons. This is very much like, no, we're witches. We're talking about fucking demons.
So it's like Sabrina the Teenage Witch meets American Horror Story.
Yes, Coven, exactly. Yeah, 100% like that. Yeah. So after Natalie finds out about Michelle and gets sad and goes and reminisces on her yearbook, Damon shows up. And Damon is very much like, I'll be your shoulder to cry on.
He's trying to be the suave debonair now.
Yeah, he's like, I don't want this getting around campus, but I'm a very good listener.
Yeah.
Kind of that whole kind of situation. And so he decides to take her in his car out to this romantic spot in the woods, or a secluded spot in the woods, I guess I should say. Yeah. But it is known as like the Lover's Bluff or whatever area. And we get this funny moment where he goes to turn on his car and it won't work. And I laughed so hard. If you were born anytime in the 90s and have seen Dawson's Creek and you watch this movie, you will laugh your ass off when this happens because I was so unexpected for me. I forgot it was in this movie.
That was fan
100% that was fan service.
Fan service, for sure.
100%. He turns his car on, and I Don't Want to Wait starts blaring through the speakers. He's just like, oh, God. And slams his
He's like slamming on it. He's like, oh, my God, that's so embarrassing.
It was perfect, though. I legitimately saw that, and I started laughing out loud because I was like, that's fucking hilarious. Yeah. That's so funny.
And perfect fan service, too.
Absolutely,
that was one of my notes, so I wanted to go by it for sure. But
I saw that and I was like, I have to mention this in this show because that's too good to miss. So they make it out to the secluded area, and here we get our next urban legend,
Right.
the Hook Man or the Hook or whatever, where they pull up and they start talking basically before we get to the legend and everything. They start talking and Damon tries to be sympathetic. He's like, I've lost someone before too. I lost my girlfriend. And immediately she's just like, Natalie's like, no, you're
seeing through the bullshit.
Yeah, you are so full of bullshit. But he tells the whole story and then it advances on her. And she's like, no, this isn't happening. And he's just like, okay, fine. I'm going to go take a piss.
Right.
Just straight up. It's like, all right, fine.
After she punches him.
Yeah, she punches him and she's like, do you want two black eyes or just one?
One black eye or two, Damon.
Yeah. And so he gets out all angry and goes off to use the bathroom. And that's when the killer shows up, wraps a rope around his neck, and pulls him down to the ground, basically. And we cut back to the car, and I believe this is at this point the killer shows up, puts the rope around the hitch, and then shows himself. Reveals himself to Natalie. Yeah.
And say themself.
Or themself, yeah. To shush.
Well, technically it is a man. It's played by a man.
It is played by a man,
Yes.
yeah. And also, too, if you're listening to this and watching this, you should already know.
Yeah, you should know.
You should know by now who the killer is. So the killer, I'll just say, the killer shows up and Natalie sees them and she freaks out, obviously, and tries to start the car, and it's not starting because we've already obviously got the classic cliche of the car not starting right. It was set up before, but still, it is a horror trope that the car won't start.
Typically, when a car is warm, like it should have been because they just drove there, shouldn't have been that hard to start it back up.
Right.
But yeah,
but we got to have it.
Horror movies got a horror.
Horror got a horror, man. So finally she gets the car started, but before she can drive off, she hears squeaking or scratching on top of the car, and we cut up to see Damon hung around the neck, barely touching the roof of the car, and he's like, "Don't drive off, Natalie. Please don't drive." He's like
don't start the car.
Don't start the car.
He's grasping at his
throat. Yeah. But obviously the killer shows up again, makes her panic. She starts the car and drives off, and it hangs Damon high in the air, and he starts struggling, and he's obviously choking to death. She runs into a ditch and then is able to back up because the killer jumps onto the hood of the car. She backs up, throwing the killer back off and dropping Damon through the windshield, killing him once and for all. And honestly, I think this might be one of the best deaths in the movie because it's one of the most bloody deaths.
I think it's my second favorite death of the movie.
Yeah. I don't know what my favorite death is. I say this is definitely one of them, but I don't know if it's my favorite or not.
Mine comes later, but yeah.
Yeah. Because this is definitely not my favorite urban legend in the film, so I don't know if I can give it my favorite death.
And is this the same, or is this similar to the story that they discuss in I Know What You Did Last Summer on the Beach with the hook and that and the car door and all that stuff? Because they definitely talk about an urban legend in that movie
on the beach
scene at the beginning of
I think it is the Hook Man, yeah, because the I Know What You Did Last Summer killer has a hook for a weapon.
But one of the ironic things that I thought about when this happened was, technically speaking, Natalie killed him.
She did, 100%, yeah. Because
obviously didn't know that she was doing it, but she was the reason that he died.
And I think that's ironic with this movie because it plays back into her backstory later on.
Yes,
that she has inadvertently been responsible for 2 deaths now.
Yep.
So yeah. So regardless, Natalie gets out of the car because she wrecks it back into the tree and runs off into the woods and somehow is able to make it to the police station.
And the killer is just not pursuing her.
Not pursuing her whatsoever. Yeah, they're just like, okay, whatever, go. Because honestly, it's a 90s slasher film, so the killer's playing cat and mouse here. They have their target victim, which is Natalie, obviously, because she's got that bubble around her of safety for now until they reveal themselves, then they can kill her. But they're not.
And another death later on, she had her, sleeping.
They could, easily could have done it.
Asleep, so.
They're not trying to kill her at this moment. But she makes it to the police station and brings Reese, who was the university cop, back to the area where Damon's body was, and they find nothing.
Yeah,
everything's been cleaned up. The car's gone. Damon's body's gone.
What is her name that plays Reese? She's in a bunch of stuff too.
Her name is Loretta Devine.
Loretta Devine, yeah, she's great.
She was great. Yeah, I loved her character.
And one of the comparisons to Scream that people were talking about with that is is Loretta Devine's character being partially influenced by Dewey Riley from Scream because
checks
he's
out,
kind of
the
a bumbling police officer / security guard type thing that's kind of above their...
they're in over their head.
Yeah, in over their heads in the situation that they're thrown into, So, just another kind of...
Another like reference back to Scream.
Yeah.
So they obviously find that his body's been has disappeared. They can't find any evidence that he was ever there. And so they have this, like, they call Natalie in for a meeting with the dean because they're like, something, I mean, you've got something to say, obviously. Oh, no, not yet. They don't do this yet. This is after. Later, it's later. Yeah, I'm sorry. I forgot. But regardless, it's in her home. They're just like, you know what? Go back to your dorm. I'm sure he's fine. And even her friends tell her, you know, he was going skiing, so he's on his trip. That's where he's at. He's not dead. So she calls the ski
because he's a prankster.
Yeah,
as set up in one of the earlier scenes when he scared them in front of Stanley Hall. So they're like, he's a jokester. He played a prank on you. It was a mannequin. He's gone. You know, he went skiing. He told us he was going skiing. That's where he's at. So.
Yeah. So she calls a ski resort. They can't tell her if he's there because, you know, secrets, like privacy and everything.
Yeah.
But they do say that a blonde man was with the group that checked in earlier, so it kind of puts her mind at ease, but at the same time too, she's like, no, I know I definitely saw him dead. So it's kind of up in the air for her, but regardless, that kind of just get passed off as the fact that it was just a prank. He's skiing now, everything's fine.
And this is when she goes back to her room again.
This is when she goes back. Yeah So, but before she gets back, we do see Tosh in her room on her computer, and she's on some kind of like goth IM site, like instant messaging site. She's talking to single goths in your area,
like an AOL chat room.
Exactly, yeah,
like only for goths or
internet
something.
Chat room, yeah. And she just kind of puts out there to everyone, you know, looking for a goth guy who's willing to hook up.
Yeah, goth single guy looking to hook up or something. Yeah,
and she gets a response, and this is very much cliche. They're talking back and forth, and then she's just like, you know, what room are you in? And she walks away to get ready, and she comes back, and it's just blinking yours. And that's when the killer jumps out and attacks her. And we get, honestly, kind of a cool scene here to where the killer's like strangling Tosh, and Natalie just walks in and is like, oh, they're having sex, so I'm not going to turn the light on this time.
Yeah,
goes to her bed. She's like, I'm not looking. I'm not looking.
Like, makes it obvious that she's respecting Tasha's boundary that she put up earlier in the film.
Exactly.
Yep.
And so she just goes over and lays in bed and turns on her headphones again, or her Walkman, puts that on again, and falls asleep. And at that point, the killer ends up killing Tosh and just leaves the room. So to say, leaves the room. And then in the morning, she wakes up and she kind of looks over, and Tosh's bed is covered up, and there's like a pool of something on the ground. She's not really sure what. She walks over and we see it's blood. She rips the sheet off and finds Tasha's wrists have been slashed as well.
And she's laying,
she's laying in her bed dead.
On her back with both her arms up and her wrists slashed.
And behind Natalie on the wall is a phrase written in blood: "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the light?" And this is just another one of the
urban legend.
Yeah. And I don't think we mentioned, but after Damon's death, Natalie get into the library to get a book, the Encyclopedia of Urban Legends, and look through it with Sasha.
This is a really cool little tie-in. The Encyclopedia of Urban Legends was written by Charles Breen, and it earlier in one of the scenes in the dorm room, Natalie picks up one of Tasha's bottles of her lithium. Yeah. And if you look at the doctor who prescribed it, it's C. Breen.
Oh, really?
It's a throwback for Charles Breen, who wrote the Urban Legends Encyclopedia. So
that's pretty cool. I didn't notice that.
And then Charles William Breen, which I think must be a relative of some sort to the author of Urban Legends, was a production designer for the movie.
So the Encyclopedia of Urban Legends is a real book then?
Apparently.
I thought that was just something they made up for the movie, and I was like, surely there's no way there's an Encyclopedia of Urban Legends.
Unless it was just in the book in the movie. I'm going to look it up right now to make sure. But
well, while you're looking it up, I'll explain what happens in the library. So Sasha and Natalie are just in the library looking through it, and we get the backstory on the urban legend of the High Beam gang initiation. which is one I've heard for years. And truth be told, is I to this day don't flash my high beams for people with their lights off because of this urban legend. And I know I live in rural West Virginia, and there's no way that this is going to happen to me, but it's an urban legend to where if you're driving down the road and you see someone with their lights off, if you flash your lights, it's a gang initiation, and they'll turn around and follow you and kill you.
Chase you down until you wreck.
Exactly. Chase you down until you wreck and kill you. And so that's kind of explained, and that's important to note because of what happens later in the film, and we'll get back to that. But I just wanted to mention that scene before we get back to Tosh's death.
So it looks like it was just in the movie.
Oh, okay.
His byline basically on the book is you can see it in the book of the movie.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that's
still cool though. I wish there was something like that.
It would be kind of neat to, and maybe the Vanishing Hitchhiker maybe has
something like that,
some of that kind of stuff in it. But one thing I wanted to talk about, and I thought you would really appreciate this, given your love of horror movies, is and when you go back and watch again, look at it and think about it, is how much they dressed Natalie to look like, and she looks so much like. God, now I'm going to draw a blank. Halloween.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Laurie
Strode.
Strode. She dressed like her. Her hair is kind of down in that 70-ish style.
You're not wrong.
She's wearing like a button up underneath a sweater, and it's kind of like, the sweater comes down, but it's opened button up top. It just looks. It looks like they're intentionally trying to give her a Laurie Strode look, to maybe as an homage to Halloween in the past.
Would make sense because this movie clearly pulls from horror references all over and everything. And I think truly we know there's 2 sequels of this movie so far, at least, that weren't well received because we didn't even know one existed.
Yeah.
I think potentially with any kind of horror movie, especially around this time after Scream and after Friday the 13th and Halloween and all those movies, they're hoping to start a franchise. Mm-hmm. Like they're hoping, we're going to be the next Michael Myers with our, urban legends killer.
Right.
So maybe they were trying to give her that whole kind of like, this is our final girl. This is our, our main person. So they have to have that final girl look. Yeah.
Yep. And she did other than her acting, she did a good job as a final girl, I thought.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I've got my issues with her, but we'll talk about that when we get to the rankings.
For sure.
So, regardless, Natalie wakes up the next morning, sees that Tasha's dead, sees the meshes on the ceiling, and I think this might be my favorite death in the movie just because this one scares me the most. The thought of someone coming into my house while I'm asleep, or I come in and they're there doing something,
right, waiting,
and then I go to sleep and wake up and they left with a message and shit. That makes my skin crawl.
Yeah.
So I think this is to me the scariest death and also my favorite death in the film. Even though I've got some issues with it, like the fact that her wrists were still bleeding under the sheets. That should have coagulated already. There's no way that would still be bleeding.
Right.
But that's just movie, got to do what it's got to do.
Yeah. And we're left to assume that she was strangled to death. Mm-hmm. So would she have bled that much after she was already
after being
dead?
killed?
Yeah.
Because they slit the wrist to make it look like a suicide.
Right. To make it look like she committed suicide because, she's gothy, emo type person. And they also try to claim that the "Aren't you glad you didn't turn on the lights" was a suicide note that she left for Natalie.
Yeah.
Which why somebody would do that?
It's First off, you're bleeding suicide note. Yeah.
You're bleeding that bad. You're going to be able to write "Aren't you glad you didn't turn off the lights" without blood dripping. Just a lot of silliness there. But horror movie's going to hurt.
Horror movie got a horror, but also too, I think this is also a way for the dean to be like, it's not my responsibility. Right. Students, this is a suicide. If it's a murder, then I got to do something about it. If it's a suicide, sucks to suck.
Yeah. And you're picking up, at this point, you're really starting to pick up that there is a systemic issue with that.
For sure,
For this university to have had these things happen and the dean keeps trying to shut
them down, sweep under the rug.
Exactly. Sweeping things under the rug. You start seeing that it's a systemic problem that we learn later on branches back 25 years.
Exactly, yeah. So After Tosh is killed, this is when we have the meeting with the dean.
Yes.
Yeah, he kind of gaslights Natalie and says, oh, it's suicide. Don't look any further into it.
Right.
Even Reese is on board with that. She's like, yes, it's obviously a suicide.
Damon skiing. And,
yes, Damon skiing. And then Michelle, we caught the guy who did it. They thought it was the gas station attendant. We caught him. He's in custody.
Right.
Everything's good. Everything's all great now. You can go back and live your normal life.
Calm down. Quit worrying about things.
But something still is off to her. She knows this is not true because she's been researching the urban legend. She knows this is another urban legend, the Don't Turn on the Light one. And so she goes and finds Paul. And together they kind of like do some research with each other. They're he takes her back to his office and she presents the whole idea of an urban legend killer. Yeah. And she reveals to him too that she knew Michelle. But she doesn't tell him the whole story yet. Right. Yeah. So
and then Paul thinks
that it's Wexler.
Right, because of the well, at this point this is when they start to go look for evidence in the newspaper annals. Yes. And they find that the year that it happened, 1973, all of the history from all of the newspapers was gone out of their storage area. So then they go talk to creepy janitor.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, how long have you been here? And he's like, too fucking long.
Too damn long.
Too damn long. And he tells them to go talk to
Wexler. Yeah. Because they ask him about it, and he doesn't say anything. He just kind of looks up at him, and he's just like, talk to Wexler, and then just walks off. So they're like, okay. So they go to his office, and you've got an Easter egg here. I'm waiting to hear this Easter egg you've got for me. But they walk in. After they actually break in because Wexler's not there, even though it's his office hours. And they start kind of rooting through his stuff. And they open one of the closets, leads to a back room, and as she opens the closet, we get another jump scare because here's the parka that the killer's been wearing.
Right, hanging
in the door, yeah. And then she pushes the door open even further, and in the back of the closet, we see there's an axe. And so here's just kind of like the dun-dun, here's your red herring, like 100% this is our killer kind of situation here, because why would a professor have an axe in his office?
And also we don't know at the time that that's the killer's garb is that jacket, but we're starting to put pieces together, like she's scared by this jacket that
we did see it with Damon
so yes, we do know that is the killer's garb. So she sees that, then she sees the axe, so it's like, whoa,
two evident pieces right here.
Huge. Yeah, and she calls for Paul to come back and see what she sees, and while he's back there looking, and she's like, it's Wexler. We know it's Wexler. They hear rustling at the door, and Wexler's comes in. So
and so they hide in the back closet until they think he leaves, and they walk out, and it's a very obvious setup that he's not left yet because the door is just wide open, and the closet door is wide open. Yeah. And he just shuts it, and he's just like, snooping around in my office, are you? Yeah.
So when do you want the Easter egg?
Go ahead and give it to me now. Tell me. Give it to me now.
Really cool Easter egg. So we've talked about him being Freddy Krueger, famously and probably his only real big role. But if you watch, whenever they open the back closet door after the jacket, after she sees the jacket and she opens that door, as the camera's panning through the closet and looking at things, there's a doll of Freddy Krueger.
Oh, really?
Hanging right above, basically right above the axe.
Okay. I did not even see that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So, just an homage to, like I said, I feel like they threw a lot of these things in there because of the being self-aware thing that Scream did,
the meta,
whole meta vibe that they had. And this movie, while it's not quite really meta and it's full nature, it's still, they're talking about urban legends while urban legend killings are happening. So there's all these parallels there, and it feels like almost like a parallel universe, especially when you have like we talked about earlier, Joshua Jackson and Rebecca Gayheart were in Scream 3 or Scream 2, which was, and I just found that, and it was the year prior, 97. So, they were in that movie. There's just a lot of parallels in this universe that it feels kind of they're tied together, but they're also respecting those that came before them.
Right. Yeah.
And by doing that, they're throwing these little Easter eggs in that you find later on and
I think honestly
drop on your movie podcast.
Exactly. There you go. I think that's honestly kind of the time that those kind of Easter eggs started showing up, because you look back, obviously Halloween, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Friday the 13th were like the originators of all this stuff. So you wouldn't have Easter eggs of those movies in their movies. But like you look at Scream, and it rejuvenated the slasher genre. It made it meta. It made it, we know we're a horror movie. And I think that idea still translates to this day, to where it's like, we know we're watching a horror movie. Let's make it fun and put like Easter eggs in here. Like, oh, there's a Freddy glove in this scene, or in like a gardening scene or something like that, or whatever's going on. Especially to relay back to characters who play these iconic horror like villains.
Exactly.
Yeah. So having a Freddy doll in his office is hilarious, because he is Freddy Krueger.
Yep.
So
about all he's known for, pretty much. So yeah, that makes sense.
Exactly. It's what he's most known for. Yeah, is playing Freddy Krueger. So to have that little Easter egg just makes it all the better.
Yep.
So after being caught in Wexler's office, they get taken to the dean's room, and here we get the not full backstory, but the idea of what happened with Natalie beforehand, because the dean says, after Tasha's little incident, I looked into your academic file, or your personal record, excuse me, and I found that you had some run-ins with the law for what's he say it is? It's
reckless
endangerment. Yeah, reckless endangerment. And then he's like, you're lucky you were accepted before this happened, because otherwise we wouldn't have never accepted you.
Yeah.
We don't accept criminals here at the school. Yeah. And then he tells Paul, you've been removed from your reporter job effective immediately. And again, Paul's like, you can't tell me to leave my job. That's not your responsibility.
Jurisdiction over the paper or whatever. Yeah.
And the dean's like, well, your editor does. And he called me and told me to tell you that. Yeah. So basically a big old F you to Paul there at that moment. Mm-hmm. And so they both leave the dean's office, like both kind of like very much distraught. And Paul's like, what is this reckless endangerment that happened? And Natalie refuses to talk about it. She doesn't want to bring it up. She doesn't want to mention anything. And so she kind of goes to find some kind of peace at this point. We just follow Natalie from point to point in this movie, to where she's like distraught and trying to find some happiness somewhere. So she goes to try to find Brenda, and we find her in the pool, and we get yet another like scene here, like where someone's wearing this parka, and we're like, oh shit, she's gonna die now. But it's just a swimming instructor,
for whatever reason, this person walks into a pool, into a indoor pool area, but walks literally the whole length of the pool around the other end, and waits for Brenda's character to come up to the edge of the pool before she decides that now is a good time to start taking off our parka. Yeah. Because, horror movie's going to horror, so we got to make sure that everybody feels like this is the killer. So
exactly, including Natalie, who's up above watching this, and she ends up breaking a window because she's trying to warn her. Yeah, and then they just look up at her like she's crazy. And so that's when Brenda takes Natalie into like the locker room, and she's like, okay, what the hell's going on with you? Explain to me what's going on. And here's where we get the full backstory.
Yep.
So here, Natalie explains to Brenda that her senior year, I guess, of college, her and Michelle knew each other. They were cheer captains together, and they decided they were going to enact one of the urban legends, the Headlights Gang Initiation urban legend. And she explains that at first it was all fun. They were laughing, having a good time with it. Someone flashed the lights for her, so they turned around and followed him and started chasing this guy. But then it got too real. And the guy lost control of his car, flipped it over, and ends up dying at the scene of the wreck. And she said that the courts were, lenient with us. They let us off with just reckless endangerment, and we got parole. That's all we got. We didn't actually go to jail or anything, which I feel like is just a very plot device. I feel like if that happens, that's vehicular manslaughter or something worse at that point.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that would actually happen in the courts.
Yeah, I'm not.
I mean, they are just two high school girls.
Yeah,
but I don't know.
And they do find out too that the guy that they killed was also their age.
He was in
high school too. So that made it even more tragic. Not that it would be any less tragic if it was anyone else, but
it's you're right. It's all the more tragic because it was a young person who died,
Right.
versus someone who was older. Regardless, it would have been sad, but yes.
Yes.
So this is the backstory that's plaguing Natalie. This is her traumatic backstory, and so that's kind of the whole issue she's had with Michelle. She says, "I've never fully forgiven her, even though I never told her to stop. I haven't fully forgiven her, and I can't find the way to forgive myself for what's happened here." And so it's just this revealing backstory, and it's the only bit of character development we get from Natalie the whole movie.
Yeah.
So
but it does it
adds a lot.
A lot.
It does.
It does.
Especially in terms of how the movie ends. It adds a lot to it. But again, it's just like the minimal character development in this movie kills me so much.
Yeah. There should have been more.
There should have been more.
Could have been more.
There could have been way more. Yeah.
Yeah.
We could have, because my main issue I think is the fact that we never learned anything really about Parker or Sasha or any of those characters.
Right.
Like they're just literally there to die, and they're only there in scenes that relate to Natalie.
Exactly.
This movie has a camera on Natalie the whole time, and we can't take the camera off of her, it feels like.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like Scream did this as well. It's on Sydney, on Neve Campbell the whole time, but it makes it work in a way. Like we do cut away from her, obviously. We cut away from Natalie in this movie as well. But it just felt so much more claustrophobic in this movie than it does in Scream.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Well, I mean, not because it's my favorite movie, but Scream did it because, and did it well because, you had a dynamic actress and Neve Campbell playing a role that was, she was tortured through so many different things, and the focus was purely on Sydney.
Yeah.
Even though there were other people dying in the meantime, but it worked because I think Sydney and Neve Campbell's acting of Sydney, it was so well done.
Yeah.
Versus, and not a huge knock on Alicia Witt, but she just didn't play the role that strongly. So
right.
her strength as a lead actor or actress wasn't as compelling and didn't draw you in as well as what Neve Campbell did. So
yeah,
for sure. But
so after this revealing backstory, my voice is cracked there. I don't know. No one hear that, please. After this revealing backstory, we do cut to Paul, where he begins to investigate a little bit more about the urban legends. And in his desk drawer left by, we assume the janitor, because the janitor looks in and sees that he got the paper. He finds a paper that explains the sole survivor of the Stanley Hall massacres, which first of all it confirms it's real, it actually happened. That the sole survivor was Wexler, and so this just sets it in Paul's mind that Wexler's 100% the killer now, because he's every year he has this trauma he has to relive, and then the 25th anniversary of it, he just completely snapped now.
Right.
This is 100% Wexler. And it's just, it's so convenient that he teaches American folklore and urban legends, and he, is killing people based on urban legends. So everything's lining up in Paul's mind that Wexler's the killer here.
Yep.
Yeah. And so then we cut to the dean. He's out in a parking garage, and like I said last week, stuff with feet gets me. I don't know why, from the ankle down just makes me squeamish. And so this scene gets me because this is another urban legend that terrified me as a kid. But he's in the parking garage, and he's getting ready to get in his car. He looks in the back seat. It's kind of like one of those moments where he's joking around. He's like, "Oh, I know no one's gonna be back there, but I'm still gonna check it anyway."
Yeah.
And Reese shows up for a second. I forget what they talk about, but they talk about something for a minute.
They were talking about Damon, and she couldn't get a hold of him.
She can't get a hold of him.
She
Right?
couldn't verify that Damon was there.
She's like, we might need more people here, because it is storming. I can't get. Damon's been missing for days. The Michelle girl is murdered, and all this stuff's going on.
She's recounting all the things that have happened, and
yeah. So after she leaves, though, the dean is watching after her. She walks out, and then a hand sticks out from underneath the car with a blade in its hand and slices his Achilles tendons. I hate it. I hate it so much. Anyone who listens to this show knows how much I hate that. I mentioned it last week
About
with
stepping on nails.
Yeah, stepping on. I mentioned it. Yeah, with I'm pretty sure with A Quiet Place I mentioned
Place,
it.
yep.
With Saint Maud, last episode I mentioned it. I've mentioned it with Hostel, even though we've never covered Hostel. There's a scene in Hostel where someone gets their Achilles tendon slit, and then they make him stand and walk across the room.
I forget that. I haven't seen that in a while, but
It makes my skin crawl. I hate it. I don't know why feet stuff gets me so riled up, but it does. But regardless, the Dean gets his tendon slit, and he starts crawling away, and the killer gets in the car and like starts rolling it in neutral, basically towards him, and crushes him on the road spikes in the garage that are supposed to go down whenever you pay your ticket fee and everything.
Right.
So the Dean is then murdered.
I enjoyed that death. I thought that was.
It was
it bothers you with the whole feet thing, but I thought it was a pretty cool death. That I won't say it was my favorite, but it was probably my third favorite.
I will give it the fact that it's a good death. I know I'm squeamish about that kind of stuff, but at the same time too, I'm not going to be like I hate it because that happened. I think I like it more because it makes me actually have a reaction. Mm-hmm. And if a death in a movie can make me have a reaction,
you feel it. Yeah.
I feel it. Yeah, then it's all the more effective for me. And even though I feel like the Dean wasn't a super amazing character or anything, I definitely think this death was well achieved and was done well.
If anything, I felt like the Dean was more of a hindrance and not so much a bad guy, but he wasn't trying to help.
Yeah, he was not. No.
So his death didn't bother me whatsoever. Like,
absolutely
I was fine with him dying.
Honestly, we keep harkening back to Scream here, but again, the Dean's death reminds me so much of the principal's death in Scream.
Yeah,
I know they're done very different ways, but it's kind of that whole moment to where in Scream when Henry Winkler goes into the office and he like grabs the mask, he's like joking around with the mask. He's like, "Ooh."
Yeah.
It's almost the same way with the Dean looking in the back seat, being like, "Ooh."
Like kind of taunting
the killer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's very much reminiscent of that for me. So after the Dean is killed, we then cut to the party, just like in Scream. We go from a party principal death to the party. And we have this big party. It's the 25th anniversary of the Stanley Hall murders again. And they're having this big frat party.
And a fun note on that is this film was actually filmed on a campus, on a real campus. I think it was in Toronto. But they filmed it on the same campus as another movie set in or that was filmed in 1986, if I can get through my words, called Killer Party. And it was a campus set slasher, and they both feature a costume party at a fraternity, characters being targeted by a masked killer, and an urban legend about murder at an abandoned dormitory. So maybe somewhat of an influence for this movie, but that was an interesting little side note. Killer Party, if you haven't seen it, maybe right up your alley because it's an 80s horror movie. So
I do love shitty 80s horror movies.
It sounds like it's shitty.
It sounds like
we've never heard of it.
This is not a shitty 80s horror movie. I keep going on tangents here, and I apologize, guys. I know I'm going on tons of tangents on this episode. But speaking of like shitty B horror movies, I saw one on Shudder the other day. It's called Slacks. SLAXX, and it's about a pair of killer jeans. But it has.
Are you serious?
I'm dead serious.
Oh my god!
But it has high ratings. Like people are like, "This movie is so bad, it's good." Like they're like, "Why is it so good?" So I mean, if you guys have Shudder out there, maybe give that movie a watch. Let me know what you guys think.
Oh my god, that's so bad.
But I'm interested in it. I might watch it this weekend because I don't know what's going on. So maybe I'll put it on this weekend and just be like.
While we're on talking about other movies, this might be another one that you'd be interested in too. So a note on Paul, Jared Leto, previously starred in a serial killer, a movie about a serial killer the year before this movie. It's called Switchback.
Okay.
So it came out in 97. I hadn't heard of it either. It's about a serial killer. So maybe something you might find interesting, but another tie to more movies, more ties to more movies and references. So yeah, so we're at this party.
So we're at the party, and Natalie shows up, and it's like a Halloween party, but it's April.
Yeah, they're doing costumes. I think what they were trying to do was
like
to dress like they were some of the victims.
Yeah,
from the
except
Stanley
someone's in a
Hall
Santa
Massacre.
costume though. There was a guy in a Santa
missed
costume.
that.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a weird. I will say though, I love the fact that when you walk in on this party, the first thing you see is someone doing a beer bong, and then it cuts away to show it's the dog. The dog Hootie's doing
And Hootie has his nose pierced. Because they talked about him getting his nose pierced earlier in the movie. So, yeah, Hootie has his nose pierced.
Yeah, Hootie's a party animal. Also, one thing I have in my notes I wanted to mention. The flyer, the reason I know this was filmed at, like, the set in April is because the flyer behind Paul in the scene where they realize Wexler's the killer has April the 23rd.
Oh,
like 23 TH. It's like Friday, April the 23rd is when this party's going to be. And I was like,
fair enough.
I mean, okay.
I wonder if they did it on purpose.
I don't know if it's on purpose or not, but I'm just like, okay.
I want to look
like maybe make it, if you're going to make it the 3rd, make it Friday the 13th or something.
Right,
make
exactly.
it,
Like
but 23 TH. So
I'm writing that down.
I thought that was funny. So maybe they did make it Friday the 13th and just they meant to change it, but like they just put 23 instead on just, I don't know.
Like they changed the date after
they changed
made
it
the
after
flyer,
they made the flyer.
so
yeah,
they just kind of like wrote on it or something.
I don't know if maybe it was just a production issue to where they meant to do 13th and put a 2 instead. It was just like,
or was it a font thing where like the 1 looked like a 2? Like
maybe.
It was one of those fancy like the like the one that has the hat and the feet.
The fancy hat and feet. Yeah, it might have been. I'll have to go back and look at it again. But yeah, there's a flyer behind Paul in his office as he's like cleaning out his office. It shows Friday, April
I look it
the
up.
23rd.
Well, it would make sense if it was the 13th. Though,
it would make way more
Friday.
sense, yeah, if it's trying to make it,
sense, So,
but regardless, we have this party going on. Brenda's excited that Natalie showed up. She didn't think she was going to. And during the party, the Parker shows up and Paul shows up and tries to get the party shut down. He's like, there's a killer out there.
Yep. Killer on campus. Yeah, we gotta go.
We gotta go. And Parker stops the whole party. And he's like, "Hey, listen to this guy right here. He's trying to make us all leave. Maybe you should leave, Paul, because like we'll have a lot more fun without you here."
Right.
And so this is that scene I was talking about earlier, where Parker and Paul just seem like they aren't friends, but there's a dynamic set up to where you think they are friends.
Yeah.
It's a weird,
almost like maybe Paul was. Maybe like maybe he was pledging with him or something because they're at a fraternity. So maybe he was a pledge at one time, and then he, because of his, his reporting and newspaper job that he had, that he couldn't do it, so he dropped out. I don't know. There's definitely a dynamic that is there, that they're friends, but they're kind of frenemies.
And maybe that was a scene that was filmed and had to get cut for time or something like that.
Yeah, it's hard to tell.
It's just, I wish that the filmmakers had given us a little bit more, because I feel like we could have fleshed that relationship out some more.
To
like
give more
Parker
depth.
and Paul could have been great friends, and then something happened between them, and now they're like, frenemies, like you're saying.
Yeah.
Just something that could have fleshed it out more.
Yeah.
But regardless, after this whole big like kind of fight situation, Paul does leave, and that's when Parker gets a phone call. Well, he's like taking shots and everything.
And this also is when Sasha says she's going to go back to the radio station. So she's got to be on the radio. So she leaves the party. And at this point, yes, he starts taking some shots and he gets a phone call.
Yeah, he starts taking shots, gets a phone call. And immediately he's just like, the phone's like, "You're going to die tonight." And Parker's just being, an asshole. He's just like, "Oh, so this is the whole, the killer's inside my house thing." So he looks at the caller ID and sees that it's Damon's phone number. So he's like, "Okay, so the call's coming from inside the house." And then the killer's like, "No, this is the one where the old lady microwaves her dog to dry him off." I'm just like, no, Are you kidding me?
And
why you
this
gotta do that?
Parker had ran upstairs because he, assumed that the killer was calling from inside the house in the attic. So he's running up the stairs. And as he reached the top, I think he got to the top of the stairs. Mm-hmm. And as soon as he reached the top of the stairs, that's when the killer says, "No, this is the one about the grandma who tries to dry their dog in the microwave."
Yep.
And he realizes what's going on. He's like,
"Oh shit!"
So
he's like Hootie and runs back downstairs.
Immediately runs downstairs.
And of course, they have this dramatic zoom in shot of the microwave, and he opens the microwave, and of course, the dog is dead in the microwave, which is
it's just. Yeah, there's not much dog left.
You don't see any. You just see a bunch of blood and stuff in the microwave. Yeah, so if you have not watched it still, and you're like, "Oh no, you see the dog dead," no, you just see a bunch of blood.
Just blood.
Yeah. But still,
pieces.
it's still the idea that the dog has been microwaved now.
Right.
And so Parker turns around and he's just like, you fucking bastard, I'll fucking kill you and all this shit. And he's just like storming off. And that's when he gets pulled into the bathroom by the killer. And I believe this is your, I was going to say, this is your, I could tell.
This is my favorite death, yeah.
So the killer takes a funnel, shoves it down Parker's throat, pours Pop Rocks down it, and then pours like drain cleaner.
Drano cleaner, yeah, like liquid drain cleaner, yeah. Mm-hmm.
And this obviously kills Parker. So
it's pretty gruesome. Like you see they do an overhead shot, which I really like this. I felt like this was the more gruesome death probably of the film, as far as like gore goes. Obviously following right off of Hootie's death, but you see an overhead shot, like basically filmed from the light, and it's looking down, and the killer's over top of him, and you really see like it's a gruesome death. Yeah. Like he comes to, he'd been knocked out. He comes to and he's tied to the toilet with his head back like this, and killer throws or shoves the funnel down his throat. Like he said, the Pop Rocks and the drain cleaner, and you see like the killer just kind of give it one last shove.
He's like shoving it down
in there to make sure it really gets in there, and the blood coming.
You've got blood, because he's like being rough with that funnel, like shoving it down his throat. It's not a ginger situation.
Yeah, for sure. It was a gruesome death, and a really, again, like you don't get a whole lot of depth out of Parker. Mm-hmm. So and when you do get him on the screen, he's kind of being a dick. So again, don't really feel bad. Pretty cool death.
Cool death nonetheless. Yeah, definitely a cool one.
And it adds to the body counts that we see later on.
Right. I will say I kind of wish the roles were reversed with Parker and Damon. Because I feel like it would make it more, impactful that Damon was the one with the Pop Rocks, because he did the whole situation in the class. And knowing the killer was in that class now, it's kind of like, you figure they might have done that. If the movie could have done this differently, if the movie had made Parker be the one go up and do the Pop Rocks instead of Damon in the beginning. Yeah. Everything could have been exactly the same, but have Parker go up and do the Pop Rocks, then he dies by the Pop Rocks later on. Yep. It would have changed nothing and just made that death more impactful.
Because they're both like jocular, frat boy, jokester type people, so they both could have pulled that off.
Easily,
it would have been believable. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that.
So you said Sasha leaves to go host her talk show, and so we then cut to that part of the movie where she's talking to someone, and there's so many times we cut to her talk show where she's talking about different sex issues, and I can't remember. I think this is the one where they're
stuck together.
They're stuck together. Yeah, the woman calls in and she's like, "No, he's stuck to me," like because her muscles have clamped down on his penis, and she are unable to detach from each other. And before anything can really continue on with that, the phone gets disconnected, and we see the guy in the background, her like assistant, get killed by the killer. And then this part, I don't know how believable this is for me, because Sasha turns around, sees the killer, and she starts freaking out, obviously. And everyone is able to hear her panicking, and everyone's like, oh, she's just, reenacting something for the 25th anniversary. That part's fine. What gets me is the fact that she starts running away through the radio station, and we still hear her through her wireless headphone. Being an audio person
who does like podcasts and stuff like that. General public probably doesn't know that that's not going to really work that way. But,
especially in the 90s.
Yeah, I mean,
like, I don't know technology back then.
Yeah. I mean, maybe, I guess... And this
she might have been able to leave the room, but like after that, the signal would have been disconnected.
Well, depending on what type it was, though, I think about like, and this really kind of puts us way out in a weird avenue. But like I think back to church and like the microphones that the pastors would wear, and they walk like around and they can mics, walk. Yeah, I mean they got a pretty decent range, and we got to assume that. I mean, well, we know that this building is multi-stories, so there's times when she could just be like maybe right below.
That's true.
I mean, maybe. I guess it's possible. It doesn't seem likely.
It's very unlikely. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, it's just very
another
unlikely,
horror movie gonna horror thing.
Yeah. So Sasha running around. There's this great chase sequence. There's also a lot of gratuitous shots of her cleavage because it's Tara Reid, and so Tara Reid's got to be a sex symbol in this movie.
I do want to point out too, she did all of her own stunts in this movie.
Did she? That's awesome.
And this whole death scene that we're talking about now, she did all of it herself. Which is, if you actually watch this movie,
impressive.
if you have seen it, she takes a really big fall at one point. There's a lot of close calls with the axe. And she said there's one part, according to Reed, the stuntman who was playing the killer used a real axe through the entire scene too while they were filming it. So it was actually a real axe that was coming at her.
Like swinging at her and everything, yeah. That's cool. I always have respect for actors who do their own stunts and things like that, especially in movies like this when you got to do those big falls and everything. So
yeah, it does say she was secured by a harness when she did the fall. But
I was going to say, yeah,
still,
they probably had safety.
I mean,
yeah.
It was
That's
at least
two-story fall or something, yeah. But yeah, Sasha gets chased to the whole radio station. She at one point psychs out the killer and goes back upstairs to the room she was recording in. And it's at this point Natalie shows up because Natalie realizes through hearing the radio broadcast and everything, this is real. This isn't not fake.
Big-chested girl
exactly
running up the stairs instead of going out the front door.
Right.
Big-chested girl who can't act.
Yeah.
Running up the stairs and...
So
Scream reference again.
Natalie shows up at the radio station and she sees Sasha through the window, and it's at this point that the killer shows up behind Sasha and kills her with his axe. And the killer just looks down at Natalie and like gives a little
creepy wave.
Finger wave.
She did a 4-finger wave. They did a 4-finger wave.
They did a 4-finger wave, yeah.
Oops.
Y'all know who the killer is already, so it doesn't matter. And so eventually Natalie stumbles across Paul and Brenda on the campus. And again, Paul is completely convinced that Wexler's the killer. So he escorts them out of their car and he stops at the gas station to call the police. And it's at this point, Brenda and Natalie go back to the back of the car because they smell something. They're like, what is that weird smell? They don't know what the hell it is. And they find Wexler's body in the trunk of the car. And so they are now convinced Paul's the killer.
Yep.
Yeah. Also, we didn't mention too, meanwhile, during the party scene, there's a scene where we cut back to Wexler's his office with Reese. Because Reese the whole time here is going back and forth between these different scenarios trying to figure out, because she now realizes, something's going on.
Right, and she knows the dean is gone, so she assumes that the dean has left campus because it's the weekend. So, he's talking about how he's going home for the weekend, as he says it, because he's weekend. He has a weird accent, but and then so we assume that Reese is trying to find somebody to help her out, right? And that's why she goes back to Wexler's office. And while she's in Wexler's office, she goes into the back closet where she had previously seen the axe. The axe is gone. Yeah. And as she's backing out,
slips and falls in blood. Yeah. And it's at this point she calls the actual police, and they say, we can't give you anyone to help because all of our officers are out responding to other calls. It's pouring the rain down. So we can't.
Of accidents and stuff are happening. Yeah.
Yeah. And so she's like, talking about how, well, I guess you got to take matters into her own hand now. And she's now the police. So she's going to go and try to solve this situation.
Right.
There's also a great dynamic with her backstory to where she's watching like these 70s blaxploitation films. And
I had a note and I didn't save it in here, but it was I can't remember what the movie was that she was watching.
I don't know, but she's like playing with her gun in front of the TV, like pretending to be the main character. So I love her character. I think she's a great character, and I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that she was like Dewey. Yeah, I think 100%. Yeah, she's very much
just
like
over her head, out of her element, but forced to try to be a hero.
Absolutely.
And, something that she's not necessarily prepared to do because she's just a security guard, but she steps up. So
absolutely. So after Natalie and Brenda find Wexler in the back of Paul's car, they freak out. They think Paul's now the killer, so they run off into the woods.
Right, and Paul sees them. He sees them run off. He's inside trying to make a phone call, and he sees them run off. So he's like, what the hell's going on?
So he chases after them. The two end up getting separated, and Natalie ends up flagging out the janitor's car. And so she gets in the truck with the janitor. And again, we have more red herring situation here where the door won't open because, it has to open from the outside. And there's just the creepy janitors being creepy and everything. And eventually we see a car coming around the corner with no headlights on.
Yep.
And the janitor goes to flash his lights, and Natalie's like, no, don't do it. But he already has done it. And that's when shit hits the fan for this, because the car whips around in the street and starts chasing them to run them off the road. And that's when Natalie realizes that the killer's in that car and the killer's not the janitor. Doesn't matter though at this point, because it's pretty much at the end of the road for the janitor.
Right. Yep. Yeah. And let's talk about for a second. Man, this killer really gets around this area fast. It's like jetpacking like a son of a bitch.
It's one of those. It's another one of those movies, and I will say Scream has this issue too. So now, yes, there are two killers in Scream, but you don't know that your first watch through. So it has this whole kind of like the killer can teleport. Friday the 13th is victim of it as well. Like he can just teleport around and be wherever he needs to be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the killer definitely is able to get around in this movie pretty easily.
Yeah.
But regardless, the killer forces them off the road. They wreck their car, and the janitor's killed on impact. But Natalie's able to get out of the door and run back to the main campus. I don't know how far away they were from it, but she conveniently shows up back at Stanley Hall.
Yeah, because it feels like they're really far away because it's like a wooded area and stuff. So you don't get a whole lot of context of the location compared
the distance,
to yeah.
But she shows back up at Stanley Hall, and she sees a light in the top left-hand window, and she hears Brenda screaming from inside, which again, the killer is able to just teleport whatever fucking random they want to.
Just ran a car off the road and then is screaming inside a building.
Exactly.
However far away. Yeah.
And so Natalie has like Superman, Spider-Man powers because she's able to climb the side of this building without any kind of issue. And she gets into Stanley Hall. And here we have Natalie's Final Girl circuit where she finds all the dead bodies.
Yeah, it's like a horror, or not a horror. It's like a haunted house.
Yeah.
Where literally she opens up a door. Any door she opens, there's a dead body.
A dead body behind
either
it.
popping
She finds
out or
Damon's
hanging
body.
Or,
She finds the Dean's body, and then she finds someone else's
Wexler's. Or no, not Wexler's. She already found Wexler's.
Is it Parker's?
Sasha's.
Is it Sasha's?
No, it's Parker's. It's Parker's.
Okay.
So there's a total of nine dead. Yeah, she finds Damon, Parker,
and the Dean. Yeah. So here we get the whole, as Dead Meat on YouTube calls it, the Final Girl circuit, where she runs through everything and finds all the dead bodies. All the while, she keeps hearing Brenda call for help, and so she goes past Damon's body into another room where she finds Brenda passed out on a bed. And Natalie goes to try to help her, and it's at this point Brenda sits up and knocks Natalie out. And we come to realize now that Brenda has been the killer this whole time.
Yep.
So that's the big reveal for how Brenda is the killer. When Natalie finally comes to, she's tied to the bed, and Brenda reveals that she is going to do her favorite urban legend on Natalie, which is the kidney heist.
Kidney heist.
Yeah.
So she comes up, she wakes up, she's tied to the bed, and she's the camera tricks are showing like she's kind of groggy, coming to, and you're in like a kind of a first person from Natalie's perspective here, which I thought was pretty neat.
I like the effect of it.
To do that. So
I also want to say that Rebecca Gayheart did such a good job portraying this batshit crazy.
She plays crazy really well.
She played this role so well.
Her eyes are what makes
it's like terrifying.
Just they're like, it's weird because she's got really pretty eyes, but like when she's nuts, they make her look even more nuts because they're just so piercing. It's wild.
And it's great too because she's got like this big curly hair.
Yeah.
Her eyes, like you said, they're like piercing into your soul, and she's got like makeup running down her face and everything. It's great. I think, for an unmasked killer, I think this is one of my favorites. Like in the 90s era, obviously Scream. No one's ever gonna top Scream for like killer reveals.
No,
I love it. But this is definitely up there for me for like slasher killers.
Surprise! I mean, completely surprised.
Yeah,
I had no way that I think that was him.
No,
or that was her.
Because I don't. Correct me if I'm wrong. You guys too. I don't know if there'd been a female slasher up until this point. Has there?
I can't think of any. No, I can't think of any.
Because
I mean, maybe if you can't. Well, was Basic Instinct? Would you kind of count her?
Basic Instinct. Is that really a slasher though? Or is that more just a thriller?
It's just a thriller, so you don't really count that as a slasher.
Like this is legitimately a horror slasher, like Friday the 13th, Halloween, Scream.
Technically, Friday the 13th, the first one is the mom.
You are right. Okay, I'm an idiot for forgetting about that. Yes. Okay. So
Jason's mother is the original killer.
Yeah. Wow, I'm dumb. I completely forgot all about that. I didn't even think about that. I think actually that.
Other than that, I can't.
Other than that, yeah. But I think that actually is a great that you bring that up because I think it makes perfect sense to tie. Again, we've got so many references. In here. Why not have a female killer in this one?
And we get into now. We learn why.
Yes,
and the why is even more shocking too because it actually kind of. It ties the whole story together, which I really like about the whole movie. And
I think, too, I'll explain what happens here, and then I'll talk about something. So Brenda turns on her projector. We have this lovely PowerPoint she's made to explain why.
Right. She's like, let me introduce you to this.
Yeah, let me show you my little presentation here. It turns on a projector, and we see a picture of her and a man, and she explains this was her boyfriend, David, the love of her life, who Natalie and Michelle killed in that wreck.
Yep.
So that is her motive. She's here for a good old revenge to kill Michelle and Natalie for taking the love of her life away from her.
Yeah.
And I love this little reveal because it ties back to what Brenda said earlier. She's like, because she says multiple times, she could have gone to NYU. She could have gone somewhere else, but she wound up here at this university. Mm-hmm. And it's, at that point, you don't think much of it. But looking back on it now, you're like, oh, that connects the dots here. She came here for a reason, not just because, she could have went to NYU but chose this instead. She came here because you were coming here.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, like I was talking about earlier, of why they're so close. Mm-hmm. She became good friends with her because she wanted her to trust her.
Yep. She wanted
her to get close.
Yeah.
Because you keep your enemies, or you keep your friends close and your
enemies closer. Yep. And she did a great job of this. Like, I truly, you're right. I was a little bit blown away by this reveal that she was the killer because, first of all, and I'm not trying to be any like sexist or anything here, but you don't often see female killers in slasher movies. And second of all, she was never a red herring.
Right.
She's like the only character who they didn't try to pass off as the killer.
Anybody who's watched any number of horror movies knows typically one of the red herrings ends up being the real one.
Usually, almost always one of the red herrings. Yeah, does.
So, and at this point, like I was thinking when I first watched the film years ago that it was Jared Leto's character. Just because of the body count being dropped so many, all the people that we knew were dead.
And with Wexler in his car and
Wexler in his car, like at this point you really think that that's truly who it is. Mm-hmm. They play off during the chase scene in the woods before Natalie finds the janitor, we have in the woods when they get separated, you hear Brenda off in the distance, and you hear Paul yelling for them to stop, and then you hear Brenda kind of scream like she's kind of gotten taken.
Caught,
right, and so that kind of they make you feel like it's Paul, and so you really believed it up until the fact that. When you find Brenda laying in the bed, you're still thinking it's Paul, mm-hmm. And then Brenda sits up, and that's just
with
like
the crazy
holy
eyes,
shit.
and then she knocks her out. Yeah,
it's crazy. So, and sorry, I keep
no, you're good. Keep going.
But the killer actually was played. But the stunt person was a man named Matt Berman, is the person who played the killer throughout the whole thing. So, him being kind of almost the killer being kind of imposing to some of these characters, it wouldn't have been that way had it been truly Brenda being in the suit. So it kind of makes sense why. But it also kind of doesn't lend a whole lot of credibility.
It definitely
to her.
Throws the audience off because you're like, oh, this is a big kind of like bulking man in this suit, and then you realize it's some tiny college girl,
right?
Exactly. Yeah, so it's kind of it fakes the audience out in a way that kind of feels cheap, but at the same time, the reveal is so good, and Rebecca Gayheart does such a good job of being, she sells the crazy, she sells the manipulative and psychotic killer here.
That it helps you to look past that.
It does, yeah. So, like I said, she reveals that she wants to remove Natalie's kidney, do the kidney heist on her. And honestly, I love this scene here because she just takes a scalpel and she just like starts poking it into her skin. She's like, "Oh, is that the liver? Well, is that the kidney? I don't know. I'm going to take out the first organ I find, though."
Right.
And it legitimately is terrifying to think, there's nothing you can do. She's just laying there while she plays surgeon on her organs and stuff. And it's like, God, that's fucked up, but I love it. Yeah.
And she actually does start cutting into her at this point. And then I think...
and then Reese shows up.
Yeah,
Reese shows up and shoots at her or tells her to put her, drop the weapon or whatever and tries to put her in handcuffs. But Brenda has another switchblade, turns around and gashes Reese across, the stomach, and then ends up also shooting her too, in the arm or something like that. But it knocks her down and out for the count, basically. Right. And so she turns back to Natalie, and at this point, that's when Paul shows up. And at this point, Paul starts saying, we can work together on this. This will be my big break. I need information on how Wexler killed everyone. Right. So I can write.
Pinning the murders on Wexler, while getting all of the story so he can get a student Pulitzer, and she gets away with it, and everybody gets what they want.
Everyone gets what they want, yeah. And it almost, to me, seemed like they were setting up to have Paul and Brenda both be the killer.
Co-killers, because they're thinking,
we're
how
screaming
are they?
again here, yeah.
Yeah, screaming again, yep.
And so it's almost like that, but then she basically says, you're cute, but you're not that cute, and turns the gun on him. And so now we're like, okay, he had nothing to do with this actually now. So that washes him free of everything. And they have this kind of moment where they're all talking, and then Natalie frees herself and is able to get the gun from Brenda, shoots her, and she falls out the window, through the boarded up window. Or does Paul shoot her?
No. Reese does. Reese comes to and shoots her right before she gets ready to shoot.
Oh, okay.
Somehow there's a second gun in there.
The's two guns, Reese has a second gun.
Reese has her gun. And maybe it's her service revolver down on her leg or something. But she comes to as Brenda is getting ready to shoot. I think she's trying to pick which one she's trying to pick which one she wants to kill first. And then in the whole movie, taking its time picking, Reese comes to and she shoots Brenda, who falls through the window backwards.
Okay, yeah.
And then it cuts back to show Reese from the floor shooting her.
Yeah.
And something about, I didn't miss that time, bitch, or something. I can't remember.
And then she also makes a comment, too. She's like, I thought I'd be a real cop before I ever took a bullet.
Yeah. She never, she thought she would actually have a real badge and everything.
Before she have a real badge, yeah. And so, with Brenda now seemingly dead, Paul and Natalie go to get help for Reese. So they go out to the car and they try to go find someone. And as they're driving down the road, they're talking about how, this will later become an urban legend at schools. The massacre that at this school will be transferred on and become an urban legend. And then Paul remarks, well, if it's an urban legend, where's the twist at? And it's at that moment Brenda sits up in the back seat with an axe and tries to kill them with the axe again, just like in the beginning of the film. And there's this big struggle between everyone. They're fighting, and they're driving down a bridge, and eventually Paul wrecks the car into the side of the bridge, and Brenda flies out through the window and dies in the river down below. Presumably dies in the river, yeah. And that everything's all good and great.
Hunky-dory.
Yep. And then we fade to black, and we cut forward sometime in the future. We don't know how far in the future. But a group of students at a different university sitting around telling the story of the movie we just watched. And 100% what Paul said came true. It became an urban legend about this massacre. And what's funny is it happened at that college, they're saying. Mm-hmm. They say it's a different university.
Completely different university, yep.
Yeah, but they say it happened at that college. And, of course, everyone at the circle doesn't believe the guy telling the story. They're like, oh, no, that's all bullshit and everything. And he's like, oh, come on, someone here has to believe me, right? And we hear a girl say, I believe you. And it kind of pans around and we show it's Brenda. Yeah, and she's like, but this is how it actually happened.
You're telling it completely wrong. This is how it actually happened, yeah. And I got to say, why are those characters so ridiculously nerdy?
Oh, I know, right?
Over the top. Like a weird, the one girl has this, terrible bangs. The guys are just like, I don't know. It almost, and I didn't even think about it until just last night, or the night before last when I was watching it. They kind of resemble the characters from Scooby-Doo.
Oh my God, you're right.
If you go back and look at it, they almost resemble Scooby-Doo characters.
They really do.
I don't know if it was intentional or if it's just like they made these characters over the top, like nerdy isn't even the right word. It's just like I don't know, but
they're like over the top stereotypes of just like the worst tropes you can think of.
Yeah,
basically.
Exaggerated.
Yeah, they're very much exaggerated. Yeah.
But one of them makes a comment that was pretty funny because they're talking about all the different people in the urban legend that they're talking about, and one of them says, yeah, and Brenda was the girl from the Noxzema commercial, and Rebecca Gayheart actually did play in a Noxzema commercial.
Oh, did she really?
Yeah, so that was another one of those like fan service type
little
things.
fan service things.
Yeah, so she was an actual Noxzema commercial girl.
That's funny.
And that is actually who it was.
So yeah, that brings us to the end of the movie.
So another thing that I wanted to wait until the end to say was there was a Latin motto for the university. I don't know what the Latin motto, what it was in actual Latin, but you see it on a lot of the emblems in some of the scenes throughout the movie. But the Latin actually translates to "the best friend did it."
Does it really?
Yes.
So that's also kind of like, I was talking to my friend about this the other day. The Thing, the movie The Thing, in the very beginning of the movie, when the Swedish people are flying the helicopter over the base.
I need to see it.
Oh, okay.
That's one that's on my list.
If you've never seen the original The Thing, you need to watch it. They basically in Swedish explain what happened. They tell you the end of the movie for the whole movie in Swedish. Yeah.
Oh wow, that's kind of cool.
But it's only if you know Swedish you'll understand like what's going on.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh,
otherwise, you have no idea what's to come. But yeah. So I thought that was a cool little thing. Yeah. So that's awesome. It's like Latin on there. If you know Latin, you'll catch that. But if not,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. So. All right, that brings us to the end of our discussion, I think, of Urban Legend. But we're not done yet, obviously. This is the Final Girl Podcast. We like to discuss and analyze these movies. So, Mitch, I'm going to ask you, if you had to say the overarching meaning or theme of this movie, what would it be, in your opinion?
See, and I knew that this was coming.
Question was coming.
Yeah, and I honestly tried to put some thought into it while I was driving up here. Even the last couple of days since I watched it, I have a hard time thinking that there's anything more to this movie than what's on the surface.
I agree completely.
I really just think that it was just something to, if anything, I would say that the theme is don't believe every story that you hear. Mm-hmm. Because that's what they keep trying to do is to prove or tell us that these urban legends aren't real. So why are you afraid of them? Or why are you fearful of them? But then also they're happening to this person. But then, years down the road, they always end up being changed.
Yeah.
And something changes that makes it that it's not real anymore, or it's just a partial truth, so to speak. So if anything, that would be my theme would be, or what I would think the theme is that, everything on its surface isn't always the truth. So
don't take things for surface value.
Yeah. Don't take things at surface value.
Okay.
While I'm also telling you that I feel like this movie is no deeper than surface value.
I agree completely. I love your idea of don't believe every story you hear. I think that's a great, theme behind this film, because truly it is. They say, don't believe these urban legends. And then, even though they're coming true, they still get changed later on at the end of the movie when the next group's telling the story.
Right.
So it's like, don't believe the entire story unless you have the facts in front of you. But at the same time, too, I think that also plays into the idea of, maybe give other people the benefit of the doubt every now and then. Because the janitor and the gas station attendant were trying to help, and because no one would listen to them, people ended up dead.
Right.
So I don't know.
A lot of assumptions.
There's a lot
guilt.
of assumptions, yeah. And so I think you're right. I don't think this movie has much depth to it. I think it's a straightforward 90s slasher trying to follow in the footsteps of Scream and I Know What You Did Last Summer. But at the same time, I love your idea of don't read into things. I mean, read it don't listen to every story you hear as fact. You know, don't believe everything you see on the internet, basically, kind of situation.
Yeah, if we were to apply it to 2021, I would say yes. Just because it's on the internet and you hear it and people keep parroting it left and right, that doesn't make it true.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that I think if I had to pull a theme from it out of my ass, that would be it.
And I think, honestly, that's about as deep as we can go with this movie.
Yeah.
Truth be told.
And, a little more fan service on the whole... out of my ass reference to the gerbil and the Richard Gere gerbil story.
Yes.
Whole urban legend that they mentioned
brought that
in
up
the movie too. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of mentioned urban legends, like the spider eggs and bubble gum and everything. A lot of the sexual conversations that Sasha had on her radio, there was a lot of urban legends about that, like the roommate replacing the birth control with baby aspirin.
Yep. That was one I was.
Yeah, there was a bunch of different referenced ones in there.
Whole bunch, and it's just even the ankle slasher under the car. I didn't even realize was an urban legend. Just something
I've heard
I'd always
that one.
been afraid of.
Yeah.
Hell, even like the old lady drying a wet dog. I'd never heard of that before. But just a lot of things that you don't think about being an urban legend. Because maybe you didn't grow up with them,
right?
But they probably were told in other people's, like we have here. The whether it be the Mothman and various different creatures,
the
flatwood monsters and stuff. Whether they consider those urban legends or monster stories or whatever they might be, they kind of follow in the same vein of that. Stories that have gone generation and generation, they change a little bit each generation, but they keep getting passed down because they have such an impact on everybody's lives, or not so much everybody's lives, but the way they grew up, sitting around fire and telling ghost stories type things.
And the majority of these urban legends, like Wexler talks about it in one of the scenes, they have that kind of like moral to it. Mm-hmm. I forget what exactly he said was the moral to the babysitter story.
I can't remember either.
I don't remember what exactly he says, but like there's the whole moralistic element to the hook man is like, be careful with premarital sex,
Right.
don't go out and do that kind of stuff. And I'm glad you didn't turn on the light. I'm sure there's some kind of moralistic element there. Hell, if I could tell you what it is right now off the top of my head, I don't know. I have to research it a little bit more. But each one of these urban legends does have a moral because they're meant to like be told to children to kind of scare them to keep them in line.
Do the right thing. Yeah. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So all in all, I think that's kind of like moralistically what this movie is too. It's a grouping of urban legends to, kind of set college kids on the right path, I guess. I don't know.
Well, and a lot of them kind of deal with the same things that you look back at Scream, which, jokes about it, but, the 3 rules of horror movies, and you mention them all the time, don't do drugs, don't drink.
Don't do drugs, don't drink.
Don't have sex, and don't say I'll be right back. And, those are all, horror movie tropes, but things that... other than don't say I'll be right back, but don't drink, don't do drugs, and don't have sex. Like those are all like general life, just don't do these things because they'll get you in trouble.
Exactly.
But yeah, that's that. There's not a whole lot more theme that I could think of out of the movie.
No, I agree with you completely there. So I think we'll go ahead and put an end on the analysis there, and that'll bring us into our Final Girl ranking. So for those of you guys listening at home, if you don't know, the Final Girl ranking is where we like to rank our Final Girl on how well they overcame their, oppressor on a scale from S to F. So this movie, we technically have 2. I guess we want to rank Natalie and Paul. Or if you just want to do Natalie. Because 2 people survived, so...
Yeah, well, I mean... If you wanted to get technical, you could say 3 because of Reese, too. But
Reese also does as well, yeah.
Because really, she's the one that really... saved the day in one aspect. Honestly, if I was to rate,
let's just stick with Natalie.
Just sticking with Natalie because that was the intent of the movie, I believe, was setting her up as the final girl. And honestly, I came in here probably having a different rating than what I have right now. Mm-hmm. I honestly think I couldn't give her any more than like a C-. because honestly, if you look back at it and after talking about it, Reese saves the day by shooting Brenda the first time, and Paul saves the day the second time by wrecking the car on purpose and having Brenda fly through the glass. So Natalie did a few things here and there, but she wasn't really that strong of a fighter. She didn't really fight off the oppression. She ended up letting her guard down. She got knocked out, tied to a bed.
She got knocked out in one punch.
Yeah, so really, as a final girl, she's not that great.
And we mentioned it too. She inadvertently kills.
Yeah, she kills
Damon.
Damon, not not obviously.
Obviously, she didn't. That's what inadvertently. Yeah, she didn't mean to kill him, but still, she does.
So I struggle even giving her a C-. The more we've talked about her.
Honestly, I'm right there with you. I'm on the verge of C-D territory. I'm gonna say a high D. I think for me. I don't know. You're right. There's so much she doesn't do a lot. She's there for people, and she tries to save Brenda at the end and everything, and she's going through this whole thing trying to figure out what the hell's going on. She tries to save Brenda in the pool, tries to save Sasha, but she's always just too late to get there. But when it comes down to the nitty gritty of it, she gets saved by Paul. She gets saved by Reese. She doesn't save herself. So, and there's even the point where she shows up and Tasha's being killed. Now, granted, she doesn't know. She thinks she's just having sex, but she lays down and goes to sleep and lets her roommate die. She kills Damon inadvertently again. She was there when Michelle killed David. It's just I find it hard to rank her any higher than a D.
Yeah.
So the movie clearly depicted her to be the final girl. They set this up, but then they made a weak final girl character. Yeah.
Yeah, and it plays out like we talked about too. And you compare, the fact that she was on screen so much, it was focused on her so heavily throughout the entire film. And I mentioned it earlier. She's not a gripping character.
She's not. Yeah.
She does. Her acting didn't really get you pulled in or sucked in. To be invested in her. And I don't know if maybe the directors, the writers, I don't know if they kind of had an original plan and they shifted it maybe as they went through. I know, you have alternate endings in movies and stuff like that.
That tends to happen a lot.
So how they kind of, as they screened it and saw how things worked, maybe they switched the ending. I don't know. I have a hard time. I would have had a hard time believing that she could have overcame all of that without the help that she got.
With the help of other people, yeah.
Yeah, so because too, Brenda, obviously she ends up surviving through the end, goes on into the next movie as well. She's a pretty badass and scary. She's
crazy. A pretty formidable villain, I would say. Yeah.
Right. So
and let's put it this way: you're right. Without the help that she got, she would never survive because by the time Reese shows up, Brenda's digging into her stomach.
Exactly.
To pull out organs. So if Reese had never showed up, Brenda would have killed Natalie like that.
Yep.
So I have to rank her low on this one.
Yeah. You're making me want to make her go even lower than a C-.
But we'll leave it there for now. So, guys, that brings us to the end of our episode. But before we go, Mitch, tell the people where they can find you on the internet.
I'm on Facebook, mostly MT Shaw 3. Mitchell Shaw is my full name. That's also my handle on Instagram and Twitter. Not nearly as active on Instagram and rarely dabble in Twitter. And you can find me also on Discord. I am on the Discord channel for this show. So I love to interact on there. It's a great platform to chat, and I really enjoy it. So you can always chat with me on there too if you're curious or want to know more. So
you want to plug your football podcast? I don't know if you guys just want to do it next year.
We're working on actually coming out with a couple more episodes. We are the Lawnchair Cowboys podcast. So if you're into football, we talk about the Dallas Cowboys. We've got a couple episodes we're planning for the off season because it's kind of hard to talk through every week during the off season. So we're going to talk some free agency and upcoming draft stuff here in the next couple weeks.
Hell yeah.
And then probably do a post-draft podcast as well to analyze all of that. So look for that to be coming out within the next couple weeks. that's about it.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really do appreciate it.
I appreciate you having me, man.
Absolutely.
I can't wait to come back. Hopefully you'll have me back.
For sure. So, guys, 13 Palm Trees Podcast Productions. Check them out wherever you get your podcasts. They produce podcast episodes of shows like D&D Kinda, Video Game Mythos, Gurus of Gaming, and Waste Local Talent, which branched off into the Lawnchair Cowboys podcast. So check them out wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/FinalGirlPodcast, Instagram @FinalGirlPodcast. And if you want to support the show, you can find us at patreon.com/TheFinalGirlPodcast. I've got supporters on there, and I appreciate all you guys. I'll even throw your names on the screen right here. There you go. If you're watching on YouTube, I'll put your all's names on the screen right there for you guys. So I appreciate all of you who support the show. Check us out on Discord. The link's in the description down below, so make sure to follow us on Discord there, interact with us.
Yeah, we'll love to chat about it.
Yeah, we talk all the time on there. So if you guys interact with us, we'll talk to you guys right back. I promise you we will. We're not going to be all stuck up and be like, nope, not going to talk to you. Also, too, I will say, I'm not saying anyone who doesn't interact with their fans is stuck up, but a lot of other Discords are full of people. We're not super full right now, so if you guys join now, we can talk to you all and everything.
Yeah, it's a lot easier to get in touch with the stars like Ryan and Michael is, the begrudging star, I guess.
The begrudging star.
But they're easy to contact and always fun to chat with on there. That's how I got on this show tonight.
Absolutely.
From interacting on there and giving a suggestion to do this movie. So
I think it was a great episode. I'm so glad to have you on the show.
I thought it was a lot of fun. Thank you for having me.
Not a problem. So thank you guys so much for listening. I appreciate it. Once again, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
it was great.
Been fun.
So until next time, guys, take it easy.
Look, movies like this end when the final girl kills the main bad guy and the credits roll.